give us the connection.
Okay, ready when you are, Mayor Cantor.
Thank you, Jerida. The hearing will come to order. Good evening. I am Mayor Sherry Cantor, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual public hearing on proposals for the Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is being conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Blanks?
Present.
Ms. Cantor?
Here.
Mr. Davidoff?
Here.
Ms. Fay?
Here.
Mr. Gold?
Present.
Ms. Kerrigan? Ms. Kerrigan? Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Winograd?
Here.
And Mr. Williams?
Present.
Was that Ms. Kerrigan that spoke? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. This is Mayor Cantor again. Because of the virtual format of this hearing, there are some special rules and procedures that I need to cover before I can begin. I would like to start with a brief overview of the process. We will begin by a presentation by town staff who will describe the NAA program and the proposals. Following the presentation by staff, we will open the floor to members of the public via telephone. I wish to emphasize that the phone access is only intended for members of the public who wish to actively participate and provide comments. If you are on the phone and do not plan to speak, please hang up and watch on television on West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5, Frontier TV Channel 6098, or streaming at www.whctv.org. Again, if you do not plan to comment, please hang up your phone now and instead listen on the TV or the internet. Thank you for that. For the members of the public who are still on the phone, please do not mute your device. The meeting moderator will keep everyone's line muted until it's your turn to speak. If you mute your own line, the moderator will not hear your voice and when she calls for comment. And I will go through that process again when we get to public comment section. With that, I invite the town staff to begin their presentation. And remember to please state your name and through the record, and all comments go through me. Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Dallas Dodge Corporation Council. Could the clerk just confirm, I was unclear whether Councilor Kerrigan was marked as present?
Yes, she was. Please confirm, Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes, I am present. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mayor Matt Hart, Town Manager, through you, I would call on our Director of Leisure and Social Services, Helen Rubino Turco, to make a short presentation on the item presented for public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Mr. Rubino Turco.
Good evening, Helen Rubino Turco, Director of Leisure Services and Social Services for the town of West Hartford. And I'm speaking about the Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program, which is designed to attract business investment in community organizations. It provides a corporation business tax credit for businesses who make cash contributions to those entities. And businesses can receive a credit of 60% of their approved contribution to certain programs, or 100% in the case of certain energy conservation programs, which are approved by the Department of Revenue Services, or DRS. So each February, the Connecticut DRS posts information about the Neighborhood Assistance Act, including the form, on their website. And they also mail the forms to the town's liaison, which is under my department. And the town distributes the form to interested organizations by mail. And those organizations, those nonprofits, mail the form back to the town in mid-April for review and for verification, which we did. And these nonprofits, these organizations identify specific projects that they would enact with the funding that they would receive from the businesses. The state of Connecticut requires that the town council receive a communication from our town manager with the list of projects and set for a public hearing to receive feedback on those projects. And after the hearing, which is tonight, the town council, you would vote to approve a resolution to authorize the town manager to submit this list with the identified projects to the Department of Revenue Services. And the submission by the town manager must be submitted to DRS by July 1, but this year the deadline is postponed until July 31st, 2020. So the town's 2020 solicitation resulted in 12 projects from 10 different local nonprofit organizations. And you received this list at your May 26th meeting and set it for public hearing this evening. So I'll just read the 12 projects from the 10 different organizations. And if any of them, typically they don't arrive to speak, but if anyone is here to speak about it, they are certainly welcome to do so. So the Ballet Theater Company submitted a requested funding for $15,000 for the Hannock Creative Dance Workshop Outreach and Performance. This one is especially lovely because there is someone from the Hannock community that used to attend this performance and watch it, and then she started participating in the dance, and now she's in the performance that her community goes to watch, that the younger members of her community go and watch her dance. So it's pretty special. The Bridge Family Center submitted 3 projects, one for $10,000 for the Fryman House, one for $40,000, $425 for replacement of windows and doors, and $15,000 for the Family Resource Center. I'm hearing a lot of noise, so I don't know if you're able to hear me.
We can hear you, but if someone is not on mute, please make sure you mute your device.
The Children's Museum submitted a grant, requested $47,000 for energy efficient appliances at the Children's Museum. The Church of St. Timothy's Middle School also submitted $33,600 request for energy efficiency upgrades to classroom heaters. The Emmanuel Synagogue submitted a request for $92,000 for temperature control upgrades. The Holy Family Passionist Retreat Center for window replacement projects of $150,000. Also for $150,000, the Mandel JCC submitted a proposal for funding for energy conservation programs. The Mercy Community Health Group requested $150,000 for the Francis Ward Towers apartment renovations. The Playhouse on Park for energy efficient lighting requested $62,803. And the last one came from Hoffman Summerwood for the installation of a new HVAC chiller for $141,284. So these requests would be any of the donations from the businesses would go towards these requests.
Thank you, Ms. Rubino Turco. Now we will be on the public comment portion of this public hearing. First, we did include a write-in option in the notice for this public hearing if the clerk is in possession of any, and I did get an email from her prior to this public hearing that she did not receive any comments. I just want to reach out to her again and confirm that. Ms. LeBreau?
There were no comments sent to me, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Clerk. All right, and with that, we will now move to the live-in call-in comments. There may be some members of the public on the phone line, but if anyone would like to comment, please feel free to dial 1-408-418-9388 and enter access code 132-601-3810. This is still a new process for us with the public hearing, so again, we appreciate your patience. Is there anyone that would like to speak that is on the phone? I do not see anyone and I do not hear anyone. So, and this is somewhat typical for this public hearing. We have had these every year, and also I don't think I've had comment. So one last, I'm not going to read all the rules on the comments if there's no one to comment. So don't get mad at me, Mr. Dodge. All right. I'm combing through any comment. I just will ask Jarida, do you see anybody that would like to comment?
Madam Mayor, there is no one on this call to comment.
Okay. We will wait 30 seconds, and if no one calls in, or if no one, we don't see any other people joining, then we will close the public hearing and wait for our public safety meeting for 2 minutes. All right. No, I'm just confirming there's no other callers on the line. No public input. And we will close the public hearing and we will start the public safety meeting at 6:45. I have 6:41 on my clock right now. So just a few minutes. Thank you.
One, two, Jarida, can you hear us?
Right now.
Just letting folks know we're having some technical difficulties. We're trying to get on.
To come back, and then I'm going to hand over the mic.
Mayor Cantor, if I can interrupt you, Chief Riddick's having trouble connecting. He's having some kind.
see people over here trying to fix the problem, I can still.
Committee. The Tuesday, June 9th, 2020 committee meeting will come to order. Madam Clerk, take the roll.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Members, Mr. Davidoff
Here.
and Mr. Williams. I can see you. Okay, thanks. And other council members in attendance, Mayor Cantor, Ms. Say, Ms. Gold.
Here.
Ms. Harrigan,
Here.
Mr. Sweeney,
Here.
and Mr. Winograd.
Here.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. This meeting is being held virtually in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order Number 7B and Rule 42 of the Standing Rules. The meeting is being broadcast live on West Hartford Community Interactive, Comcast Channel 5, and Frontier TV Channel 6098, YouTube, as well as www.whctv.org, and it will be available for on-demand viewing on the town website. We will begin with presentations by invited guests who will discuss issues related to police accountability. At the end of the presentations, members of the committee are welcome to ask questions or make comments. After the committee members are finished, other members of the council who are present are welcome to do the same. If you wish to be recognized, please raise your hand. And finally, a reminder to all participants, please identify yourself by name and title when you speak. And I will recognize you through myself as the chair. Now, before I go into the first business item, I would just like to take this point of privilege and just add some of my comments. So first off, I want to thank Chief Riddick and his staff that are here this evening and that will provide us with this presentation, and I'm sure we will have some fruitful discussions. I also want to thank the general public, especially students who have written to us over the past few days with questions and comments, as well as our residents. This issue before us is a very important issue. Black Lives Matter, racism in our Black and Brown communities, things that a number of residents who are Black and Brown have suffered over the years. And I want to be clear, because this is not all policemen. And I think we all know that. And I think we have a lot of work to do, and we recognize that. And we will, I'm confident that we will have positive outcome. And the only way we get to a positive outcome is by sitting together, collaborating, and having meaningful discussion and meaningful exchange. I like to err on the side of positivity because we're all good people. We may have some flaws because we're human, but we can work through those flaws and become better. And not only can we become better, but we can work towards the generations that are coming up behind us so that they are much better than we are. And one of the things that I firmly believe in, that we are all here on borrowed time, and we're charged to leaving the earth and this place better than we found it. So with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Riddick and his staff for our presentation and questions tonight.
Good evening. Can you hear me, Jerida? Can you give me a test?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Okay, awesome. My apologies for the technical difficulties. We actually did test this several times, and I really can't, I don't have an explanation for that. But anyways, as we go forward on this evening, it's a very trying time. And as I mentioned at Town Hall, when we had a couple of the rallies, for us to go forward, we have to acknowledge, recognize some of the sins of the past. Difficult conversations that we had. For us to go forward, but we don't have South, the precursor to modern day policing in a way. In 1865, we have the 13th Amendment abolishing slavery. But we all have to understand and realize that there was a prison exception to the 13th Amendment. And that prison exception made it clear that those in prison were not considered slaves. So it does not take a rocket scientist to understand that that exception was used to continue slavery, specifically to the African Americans, and I'm going to use synonymously African Americans and blacks during that time. As you consider to go forward, you have Jim Crow, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, all the way through to the 1950s and the 1960s, and some of us who are a little older, or should I say a little more experienced, were actually alive during some of those times. And our parents certainly were. As we continue forward on the war on drugs, mass incarceration, throughout all these different events, throughout all these different times in American history, the consistent entity that was utilized by the government to quote unquote keep blacks in line, disparate impact and treatment, unfortunately, has been law enforcement. Now, my words do paint a wide brush, but I by no means saying every single police officer during that time was part and parcel of the problem. But we just can't deny what is obvious. There was a huge problem. We saw the pictures of dogs, the fire hoses, and the like. We go into the 1980s, and now the late 1980s, and we see Rodney King, and we see videos that come up, and we consistently still see blacks being victimized by bad cops. Yet, on many of those occasions, America sat back and watched, because many of those bad cops were not even arrested, and those that were arrested were not prosecuted. It seems like the missions into other continents. The time is now. And I believe America is ready, and if not, she will be ready. So as we go into modern day, we're going to talk a little bit about our police training in the West Hartford Police Department. We are under the auspices of post and post mandates with the Police Officers Standards Training Council and their mandates. And I'm going to explain what some of their requirements are and what we do in the West Hartford Police Department. We're not going to go through everything. We're going to try to pick topics that are relevant to today's times. Recertification. Post requires 60 hours over 3 years. West Hartford provides 105 hours over 3 years for an additional 45 hours. Police and the law. Post requires 7 hours over 3 years. West Hartford provides 9 hours over 3 years, an additional 2 hours. Bigotry and bias training. Post requires 1 hour over 3 years. We meet that standard. Fair and impartial policing, 1 hour over 3 years. We meet that standard. Human relations, post requires 3 hours over 3 years. We provide 6 hours over 3 years for an additional 3 hours. Firearms training, 9 hours in over 3 years by post. We provide in West Hartford 25 hours for an additional 14 hours. Please understand, when it comes to firearms, people always think it's just a matter of just shooting and shooting. But no, these are shoot, don't shoot scenarios. We teach our officers when they should show restraint and not use the firearm also. As we go down further to de-escalation training, there is no post requirement for that. However, the West Hartford Police Department provides 4 hours annually every year regarding de-escalation. Use of force, there's no post minimum. The West Hartford Police Department provides 15 hours of training. And especially relevant to today and after the post George Floyd and what we saw in that video, positional asphyxiation and excited delirium. There is no post requirement, but in the West Hartford Police Department, every year we provide 1 hour of training. So when you see George Floyd on the ground gasping for air, our officers are trained every year to sit that individual up. Once they're handcuffed and under control, they are to sit them up. That's what we're trained every single year. Additional training. We have the LEADS program we sent 5 officers to last year. Law enforcement active diffusion strategies. Again, more de-escalation. We have 43 officers who are trained in crisis intervention team. We actually had an additional, I think a dozen or so was going to start this past spring, but because of COVID, we had to cancel that training. We have an annual use of force summit that we sent officers to, 17 in the past couple of years, last 2 or 3 years. We have 4 officers who are trained through the FBI as negotiators. Again, de-escalation. And all West Hartford personnel are trained in the EMR and emergency medical responder training for 8 hours. After you graduate from post, there is no requirement. But here in West Hartford, we provide that training 8 hours every year. I think that gives you a glimpse of the extensive amount of training, the understanding that your police department goes through. And kudos goes to the prior administrations that came before me in understanding the importance of this training. Now we're going to transition over to some questions that were submitted to me prior to this meeting. And I'll just ask for your indulgence as I go through these questions, if we can hold, Madam Chair, with your permission, all questions to the end. I might answer many of them, and then I'm more than willing, and our staff here are more than willing to answer any question that you want at that time. If I have your permission, Madam Chair?
Yes, you do.
Thank you. First, Councilor Williams submitted a question regarding, in Connecticut, there are certain state employee union contracts that supersede and nullify in some respects the Freedom of Information Act. Specifically, I think we're all aware of the state police. It's actually law where some of their personnel files are shielded. That is not the case in West Hartford. Everything is subject to FOIA. The difference would be anything to do with medical or any other invasion of privacy, addresses, and personal information would not be subject to that. You also asked me, do I think the exemption is a good policy end? And I don't want to speak about another agency, but I will say that transparency should be paramount. And as long as it's something that does not invade a person's privacy to that extent or any extent that bears on their families, but personnel files and internal affairs reports should be allowable. And again, it is FOIable here in West Hartford. The next question that is asked, what is the process for a police disciplinary action in West Hartford? Let's give you a scenario. If there's an officer who commits a violation out in the field, if it's a minor infraction, maybe an officer is rude, that would be a Class B infraction, in which that can be investigated by the patrol division or any other division that the officer is assigned to. For more serious matters, such as excessive force, theft, that would be done by our professional standards division. And in other words, our internal affairs division. Initiate an investigation, submit their report to me for an approval. Once I approve the IA investigation, not any discipline, but the disposition of the investigation, that would be submitted to our Citizens Review Board. They would review it. They would provide recommendations, submit that information back to me, that I would levy the discipline. In between that time, when the discipline comes, officers are entitled to a watermill hearing. It's a pre-disciplinary hearing in which they can, with their union representative, explain their side of the story, any other mitigating factors that might be involved. After hearing that, then I can met out whatever discipline that I deemed appropriate. There are no statutory restrictions on the chief's authority. There are no contractual restrictions on the chief's authority here in West Hartford regarding discipline. But again, dealing with the arbitration process, which I'm very familiar with, you have to be fair and consistent. So similarly situated people should receive the same type of discipline. And I believe that's the end of the questions there. Next, coming up from Councilor Winograd. He asked, the civilian complaint process, any efforts that would make the process easier, and statistics regarding such complaints over the past few years. In 2019, we had 13 complaints, 5 sustained. 2018, we had 12 complaints and 5 were sustained. And the mayor also asked this question, the composition of our Citizen Complaint Review Board. Since 2015, they have met 5 times. In 2015, 5 complaints. 2016, 6 complaints. 2017, 4 complaints. 2017, 3. There was a gap until this year, February 20, where they reviewed 10 complaints, which also includes some from 2019. It's important to understand the past practice that has been in West Hartford is that the complaints that the Citizen Review Board reviews are all external complaints from the community. Internal infractions that maybe that's brought up through the chain of command does not go under their purview. The composition of the board, the chairperson is the assistant chief, well, a assistant chief, currently Assistant Chief Coppinger, a representative from Corporation Counsel, a patrol captain, a lieutenant, a sergeant, a patrol officer, and a member of the police union. And we also have 2 civilian members. One is a doctor and one is currently an attorney. As we were reviewing, getting prepared for this and throughout the past year or so, when I was in Waterbury, we did not have a Citizen Review Board. So having this here, and as we all discussed and examining some things, is definitely an area we can improve upon, especially the composition. It appears to be, there's no appear about it. It's unbalanced. So that was definitely something we'll be looking into going forward. What happens once the board gets the information? So prior to the meeting, each member of the board gets a sent electronic copy of the complaint, the original complaint, all reports, supervisory documentation, and any video or audio that's available. When the board meets together, they review the entire package and they review the video and the audio files. Upon completion of the review, the board recommends a disposition, and the representative from Corporation Counsel is the person who writes up the findings and the conclusion of the board. Again, it's important to note that those findings are not binding, they are recommendations. And I believe that is appropriate. The next question, whether there is anything in the collective bargaining agreement or state statutes that I, as the chief, believe is a hindrance to promoting the type of behavior and attitudes that we would want to see in a West Hartford police officer. Here's one thing throughout my years of experience that I think definitely needs to take a look at is the arbitration process. I don't have the stats, but I can say anecdotally, and talking with my colleagues as fellow chiefs, the difficulty you have is going to arbitration sometimes, and if you feel you have the ground necessary to terminate an employee and you do so, they get their job back in arbitration. Or you levy severe discipline that you feel is relevant and necessary to correct the behavior, and then it goes to the arbitration panel and they will reduce it. So if there's ever an area that I think should be looked at and potentially reviewed, that would definitely be an area. The next question, whether there are any outside organizations comparable to the Fitch Group that analyze our staffing levels and my thoughts as a chief on commissioning such a study. Back in about 2002 or 2004, when I was a sergeant in the Waterbury Police Department, we undertook, Carol Boracker and Associates did a study of the entire police department, the functions and operations of the PD. Back then, these studies aren't cheap. Back then, it cost $100,000. Again, Waterbury's larger than West Hartford, and I think a comparable study now is probably about 50% or 70% or so. The next part B of that question to me was if I feel that was necessary currently for West Hartford. In my humble but professional opinion, I don't think that is necessary or needed for us right now. And the reason why is the town of West Hartford decided 2 years ago to hire an outside chief with a fresh set of eyes, experiences. Subsequent to that, I have hired an assistant chief from the outside, Assistant Chief Larry Terror, who is an attorney. And in his side job, this is what he does. He evaluates police departments, he writes policies and procedures and reviews these things. So that is asset to the organization. And I think with the current staff that we have, top to bottom, and to the horizontal also, we can do enough of a self-assessment. We've been finding things ourselves, making changes along the way. So I think our current composition and what we're doing now, save the taxpayers, $100,000, I think we're fine going forward regarding that. Next, we'll go to some of the questions that the mayor submitted. Mayor Cantor, I believe some of these questions have been submitted by her and others she solicited and took from other people and forwarded to me. Madam Mayor, I'm going to change the order just a little bit to keep it fluid. I anticipate when I get to the 8 can't wait, there's going to be a whole bunch of questions and the like concerns. So number one, what impact would a defund police policy have on our police department? Well, we're asking the police chief, so I'm going to say I don't want to defund my police department. I think any lack of funding, we got probably a fire engine driving by. 1 second. Okay. I'd like to keep the current funding. Our budget's about 16.7, and just understand the composition of our budget. 94.29% is salaries and benefits. 4.37% is contractual fixed cost invoices, such as gas, service maintenance contracts, our CAD system. So out of all that, we probably only have about 1.3, 1.4% of what we would call or classify as discretionary monies, which we use for training and buying equipment. So every year, at least the last couple of years, and I believe historically, we've submitted clean, lean budgets. So part of the discussion surrounding the fund and police deals with what can you carve out to somewhere else and parcel out. Now, I do believe there's certain things that police officers, it's not really in our skill set. I would not cut monies from us because we do so many other things, but dealing with the mental health, that's, we're not doctors, we're not physicians, we're not counselors. We may form in those roles, but for us to be the point, I don't think that's appropriate for us. It's probably better served at a state agency or possibly social services who might need funding. Dealing with the homeless population, again, we can't arrest our way out of these things. We can be partners, we can assist, but for us to be the point, I don't think that's appropriate for us. But we will do whatever we need to do to be partners and to assist. But again, I respond to the question that was asked. None of those that I believe should require a reduction in funding for the police department. The next question that was asked of me, Madam Mayor, you'd asked about the Citizens Review Board and the structure and activity. That was already covered by Councilor Winograd, so I'm going to skip over that. And we'll do to our data on motor vehicle stops. So in 2018, we had a total of 6,048 motor vehicle stops. Of those 6,048 motor vehicle stops, 3,353 were conducted against whites, 1,044 against blacks, 1,137 against Hispanics, 227 Indian, 287 Asian, and then we have a block for unknown we don't have statistics for. In 2019, these are calendar year, by the way, data for calendar year. For whites, 4,166, blacks, 1,568, Hispanic, 1,522, Indian, 274, Asian, 330, for a total of 7,921 motor vehicle stops. Last but certainly not least, we'll get to the 8 can't wait and questions regarding the police department with body cams and use of force issues. First, regarding body cams, we currently do not have body cams. However, the West Hartford Police Department does have the WatchGuard in-car dash cam system, which is set up inside the vehicles, which can capture video. There's also, we capture audio by the microphones on the lapel. It is our plan going forward. This was tasked actually by the town manager. We had this discussion at the end of 2019 to pursue body cams. It's a very expensive venture. You're talking in police department. I'll give you an example for Waterbury, and we give an example for here. When I looked at that when I was a chief in Waterbury, it's about $1,000 or so per camera, and so you're looking at roughly $300,000. And then your annual cost for storage and fees was additional $150,000 to $200,000 a year. A lot of money. West Hartford, we're sworn at 131, budgeted 132, currently at 121. some of those numbers be slightly lower, but still your annual cost for storage, although it's a cloud function too, it can be a lot of money that you have to budget for every year. That being said, I think the country has spoken, and one way or another, it's going to happen. There's no doubt in my mind regarding that. Whether it's a state mandate, which is probably going to happen, and hopefully it won't be an unfunded mandate, it'll be a funded mandate. We can go forward with that. We do plan on doing wear tests this fall, reaching out to several vendors to see what works well for us, what suits our needs, and we hope to select a vendor next year in 2021, sometime in the winter or early spring, and then potentially put that forth as a capital expense for FY22. That's our plan, unless the state comes forward with some money prior to that, we would go on to that. 8 can't wait. An organization that puts out information and guidelines what they believe police departments should be following regarding use of force issues. I think as we look through this as a command staff and as a police department with our training division, going through some of these things, I was pleased to say that everything mentioned in here is addressed by the West Hartford policies and procedures. Kudos again to the previous administrations, the officers and the personnel involved to have the foresight to take care of these things many, many years ago. And so we'll just go through these. I'm going to hold chokeholds and strangleholds to last. De-escalation. Our police duty manual, which is the police reference directory, police reference, I got it right. In there, it's talking about de-escalation. We're required to give warnings before we use force when practical, whether it's deadly force or just general force. Again, already in our policy. Number 3, it talks about here. Again, I skipped number 1. Number 3, require a warning before shooting. Again, our policy dictates when practical that an officer before utilizing deadly force should give a warning. And I'll just read this, and I don't want to be long-winded. I know I'm going pretty long, but it's very important. So I will read this as quickly as possible. The use of deadly force, the use of deadly physical force by officers of the West Hartford Police Department is permitted under the following circumstances. A, to defend the officer or another person from what the officer reasonably believes to be the use of imminent use of deadly force. B, to effect an arrest or prevent the escape from custody of a person whom the officer reasonably believes has committed or attempted to commit a felony which involved the infliction or threatened infliction of deadly force. And where feasible, the officer has given warning of his intent to use deadly physical force. And the officer reasonably believes that the person still poses an imminent threat of causing serious physical injury or death to the officer or a third party. Firearms shall not be discharged under the following circumstances. 1, as a warning shot. 2, at a moving or fleeing vehicle unless circumstances come within section 1A or 1B, which we mentioned before was serious physical injury or imminent death of the officer or a third party. And bullet point 1, officers shall not intentionally place themselves in the path or reach inside of a moving vehicle. Bullet point 2, officers, where possible, shall attempt to move out of the path of a moving vehicle before discharging their weapon. As many of you know, that's actually state law. But again, the West Hartford Police Department was way ahead of the curve years ago and had this. And this policy was last updated 2016, at least that far back. We should find comfort with that. Going back to the 8 can't wait. The next box says exhaust all alternatives before shooting. As I expressed already, our policy allows us some discretion in here And I don't think it's realistic to say you have to go through step by step by step. As you meet up with force, you are to enter in and bare minimum match the force brought towards you and still attempt to de-escalate. So we do have this covered in here, but we have to be careful with, you have to do A, B, C, D before you can get to the next, before you get to E. Next, duty to intervene, the next box that we have here. This is covered in our policy and procedure under neglect of duty, where officers have a duty to act. This is not clean and cookie cutter. So this is another area we've examined and looked at that we should probably have a totally separate section dealing with duty to intervene by our police officers. But again, currently it is covered under neglect of duty. Next box, begin shooting at moving vehicles. Again, I just explained and read through our deadly force policy. That's already a requirement that we have to follow up. Establishment and use of a force continuum. So here in West Hartford, we really don't have a quote unquote force continuum as in using that actual language. However, we do have the constructs of that within our policy. We'll go to policy 7.0, use of force, section I. The West Hartford Police Department issues officers several weapon systems to aid the officer when deciding to use force. Officers may choose among several systems when the force becomes necessary. Nothing in this policy should be intended to prevent an officer from making a choice of options in a particular order. That is quote unquote your continuum there. Or moving between systems during the course of an incident. As we have listed here in order, which again could be construed to be a continuum, is 1, hands or holds combat techniques. Next, handcuffing, belly bands. 3, pepper spray, OC spray. 4, batons, strikes. Tasers after that, pistols, shotguns, and rifles. It isn't an order, but again, you have to meet the threat that comes at you. So if a person has a knife or another person has a gun, you're not going to start off with your taser. And you're going to draw your weapon. You can be backed up by less lethal force. That could be an option. You have to meet that force. I also would like to say, back in 2015, we had a situation with an officer involved with the gentleman who had a sword, swinging his sword and everything else. Several officers had their weapons drawn. We were able to safely bring that person into custody and arrest them and provide them the care that they needed without injury to himself or the officers, without firing our weapon. Most recently, in 2007 and 2019, we have a gentleman when a call came in. He was despondent. He wanted to be killed by officers, called suicide by cop. Long story short, he kept reaching toward his waistband, into his coat. Our officers tactically deployed themselves to fan out. They did have their weapons drawn. An officer seized the opportunity to sneak up behind the individual and then taser them. And some of you in public safety saw this video. Taser individual, get him into custody on the ground with minor injuries, and we were able to recover a loaded firearm. So again, it's kudos to the West Hartford Police Department and their training, their patience, their understanding, and how we conduct ourselves going forward. The next box, requiring all force to be reported. Again, we're way ahead of the curve. This has been in place for years. Every officer is required to report their own force. So you won't have a report with a group use of force of 4 or 5 officers on there. Each officer has to write their own use of force report and have it reviewed by a supervisor. So that being said, I think I've covered all the 8x8 except for the big one. The ban on chokehold and strangleholds. Currently, for the West Hartford Police Department, we don't train that way. We don't train with chokeholds or strangleholds. However, that would be considered a deadly force situation. So currently, that would be approved if an officer felt that he or she's life was in danger or a third person was in danger. it would be approved. It would have not have been approved in the situation that we saw in George Floyd. I'll provide you with a quick example. You're fighting with a suspect, you're trying to get him under control. The suspect's getting the best of you. You are both on the ground. The suspect is on top of you, punching you. You're trying to fight back. That is not a situation that you want to pull your firearm out. If you pull your firearm out, you could lose it, and the suspect can take it from you, and who knows what could happen at that point. You're being punched. You feel your life's in danger. You are losing the battle. That'll be an opportunity to utilize a chokehold to get that individual off of you and to save your life. These are situations that we talk about and you hear in law enforcement, why we want to keep it in only for a deadly force situation. Now, we can clean up our language on this. We can make that a lot clearer than it currently is. We've discussed that. We'll evaluate that going forward. We have our use of force instructors here with Patriots questions you want to ask later regarding that. Officer Shane McAvey. But that's our stance for now, and I am comfortable with that. I am also very cognizant of what's happening nationwide. I'm sensitive to this topic for obvious reasons. I'm also aware that New York has banned it, and I'm also aware that Denver Police Department has, and I believe others have followed suit. And I know our state legislators are currently talking about this. So it is going to be a huge issue, and it may become law. Almost done. Lastly, the question submitted by the mayor: what community policing strategies, policies, and practices do we have in place, and what more can be done? Again, the West Hartford Police Department has been cutting edge. Kudos to the previous officers, administrations for the many things they've done over the years and we continue to do. I'm going to list some of the things that we do. For time, I won't list everything, but just a few. We were the first police department in the state of Connecticut to implement an LGBT policy specifically to guide officers with dealing with transgendered citizens. We teach at schools, develop curriculum. We handle calls in respective schools. We attend PTO meetings. We participate in the I Can Bike program. The senior picnic, we provide food for the seniors, and you better get it right with the seniors because they'll let you know if their hamburgers aren't right. And trust me on that. We have our college academy, our citizens academy, our numerous open houses that we've had over the years, our job fairs, our car seat program, our cadet program, coffee with the cop, and so on and so forth. We have our beat officers in town center and Blue Black who interact with the public. One important thing that I gave AC Carpenter credit for, Assistant Chief Carpenter, that he found. According to the Department of Justice, on their website, their Office of Community-Oriented Policing, they have recommendations or guidelines there for implementing community trust building activities. There are 11 different categories, and the West Hartford Police Department already meets 8 out of those 11 categories. So that being said, I think we're in a good place. We are not satisfied with status quo. We know we can get better. We know we need to get better. We are in transition. We are young overall. A lot of inexperienced supervisors we have and some experienced officers, but our moral fabric is good here. We have good people, not perfect people. We have good people in the police department. We have had some very difficult conversations. When I first came here 2 years ago, we had some very difficult conversations. I haven't been a person of color, but my experiences and sharing some of those things and being somewhat stuck in the middle of being blue enough for the officers and being black enough for your community. It's a tough situation to be in. So I understand the pain of the African American community, but that's my pain. It's my family's pain, my grandparents' pain. I get it. I understand. But I've also seen some quality officers who did not look like me. I've seen white officers put their lives on the line. This isn't a cliche. This is what I've seen myself going after drug dealers, getting guns off the street, getting dragged by cars, getting punched, getting stabbed. So I've seen it. I've been there. So it's not an excuse. It's actually more of a burden for the good officers. We have to stop those that we know who are tarnishing our badge. That's our task. That's our charge. That's our obligation. That is our oath. That being said, I thank you for your time. I hope I covered a lot and wasn't too long-winded. I apologize again for the computer issues, and I'm ready for any questions, follow-ups that you might have, as well as my staff. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chief. Wow, that was a wonderful presentation and a report out. And I know, Mr. Town Manager, you wanted to comment, so I'm going to let you do that. But I also want to be mindful of the time that's before us, because I do know that we have a town council meeting scheduled. And what I would like to suggest, Mr. Town Manager, because this topic is very important, and I know that we still have much more to discuss. So I would like to recommend if we can schedule another meeting sometime in the future where we can continue this discussion, because I do have some more questions and comments, but I want to be mindful of everybody's time here. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Town Manager, because I know that you have some comments. And I don't see any other hands up. So if I'm missing someone, please text me.
Thank you, Councilor Blanks. Matt Hart, Town Manager. I want to thank the council and you for hosting this very important conversation, as well as all of our residents and citizens who've added their comments. And certainly last, but certainly not least, Chief Riddick for his very thorough and comprehensive presentation tonight. I did have some action steps, Councilor Blanks, to suggest to the Public Safety Committee for your consideration. And I will type these up and email them to the committee and copy the full council. Based on the Chief's presentation tonight, I would highly recommend that we review the organization and the composition of the Citizens Complaints Review Board. How that could be revised in a way that best meets our community at this point in time. Secondly, Chief talked about our interest in transitioning to body cameras. We currently deploy cameras in our police vehicles and our cruisers. We've done that for a number of years. We think it's time to take this important step. As the Chief said, we will be doing a demo with several different types of cameras over the course of this year. And we will present a proposal in for your consideration later on this fiscal year. Third, the Chief talked about, reviewing our use of force policies. And yes, we are ahead of many of our peers, many of our colleagues around the state and around the country, but the extent to which those can be tightened up further, along the lines of what's suggested by 8 Can't Wait and similar organizations, that's something we're interested in doing as well. 2 more things. Community engagement. We know that the community would like to take part in this conversation also. And we want to work with the committee to best accommodate that. What would be the best structure? What would be the best format to bring in and have a community conversation in a virtual way? And then last, but certainly not least, I think this is incumbent upon all of us, not just the Public Safety Committee. What needs do we have? What needs is the police department trying to address right now, particularly in the area of human services, that might be better met by other municipal departments or agencies if we had more resources in that area? So those are some recommendations that I have, Councilor Blanks, for the Public Safety Committee to consider. I know, Chief, in the remaining time we have left, would be happy to take any other questions council members may have. We'll type these recommendations up and forward them to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there any other questions other than what was sent in to Chief Riddick? Okay, I see you.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna call on Counselor Sweeney.
It's less of a question, but more of a thank you to the chief for sharing his story and his experience over the last couple of days. I know that I've been present at both the rallies that took place in town, and his presentation and his sharing of his experiences was vital to, I think, that public conversation. And I appreciate his presentation here tonight, and also. We do, without saying, also the same to Councilor Blanks for sharing her experience and story as well over the weekend. So again, it's a pleasure to serve this town, but even more so with the two of you over the last couple of days. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor Sweeney. Is there anyone else? Mayor Cantor.
Thank you. I did have one additional item to talk about. There's the website we had talked about potentially. I want to make sure that's on the to-do list. I know we have already sort of touched on it, but cleaning that up and making sure that our citizens can access and clearly find what the policies are of the police department. That would be very helpful. And I also want to echo, I've had some individual conversations with the chief and many emails that were sent. And I just want to thank him for his leadership, his human nature, and his real experiences, and the strength of character. And we need a very strong example of that more than ever. And I'm proud of our leadership team. I'm proud of our department. As the chief said, we're not perfect. There's always more we can do. I also want to thank Carol Blanks for her leadership. I am so thrilled to have your leadership on this committee. And I know we're going to work together well to make our town the best it can be and our police force the best it can be. And so, again, much more to follow. I just do want to talk about community conversation. I have done some outreach. The No Webster House did a 1619 project that was very well attended. And people, this really could be a continuation off of that, and our Witness Stone project. And then community conversations coming off of that, and including the police in that. I don't know if it should just be police as well as it, more community-wide discussion. Councilor Blanks, Lorna Farquharson from the Board of Education would all be wonderful partners in this endeavor. So I think we're excited to work on that a little bit and roll something out in the not too distant future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Are there any others? Deputy Mayor Davidoff.
Thank you, Chairperson Blanks. I would be remiss if I didn't remark on tonight's public safety meeting. Your opening remarks, Chairwoman Blanks, were very well thought out, appropriate, timely, and I think expressed the sentiment of many in our community, hopefully all of our community. And Chief Riddick, your presentation this evening basically provided us with a true understanding as to the status of our police department, its policies with respect to those which are relevant to the current times. And I've listened to your comments in several venues with respect to policing and the personal situations you have found yourself in. And as a result, I have more admiration for you as a person, and I did admire you quite greatly prior to this. So my big takeaway is that there's a lot of listening that needs to take place, and in order to do that, we need to be presented with the facts and with the options going forward. I think tonight's public safety meeting is just the beginning of the conversation. I respectfully request Chairwoman Blanks that we schedule another meeting of the Public Safety Committee in the very near future to address many of the concerns that were raised this evening, and which Manager Hart outlined that he'll be sending forward to us. I think that these issues need immediate attention. It's not something that can wait. And I think that we have an engaged community. We have engaged leaders who are willing to do the hard work to make things happen. So whatever support I can lend you to facilitate that meeting and moving it forward, I'll be more than glad to do so. And I would encourage members of our community to reach out to us, to Chief Riddick, to the mayor, to the manager, to let us know what more we can do to take the appropriate steps necessary to address the needs of our community as we move forward. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Davidoff. Are there others? I'm looking, so if I miss someone, please let me know. Okay, I don't see, oops. Did I see in looking, no other hands are raised? Okay. Okay. All right, so before I adjourn the meeting, I want to echo just about everyone's comments. I do believe and strongly believe that we should have another meeting, another scheduled meeting to discuss and continue the discussions. These discussions are good, they're fruitful. Our town is watching, our town is listening, and just about everybody is interested in getting involved. We've seen that from the number of responses that we've received over the past few days. So I think the time is now. I believe the time is now. We are at a turning point, and I strongly believe that we can do better. We can acknowledge what has happened in the past, but I do believe that we all have the tools to do better. And when we know better, we can do better. And I'm going to leave it there, and I'm going to ask for an adjournment. The time is 7:48. So I will call this meeting adjourned, and I'll turn it over to Mayor Cantor so that we can start the town council meeting. Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate everybody's input and their hard work in preparation for this meeting during this very difficult time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Blanks. Again, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Chief, and to your team for being here and being present for all of us, and more to follow. So with that, we are going to call the Town Council June 9th Town Council meeting, virtual Town Council meeting to order. And I'm going to start with good evening. This is Mayor Sherry Cantor. The Tuesday, June 19th, 2020 regular meeting of the Town Council is called to order. This meeting is being held virtually in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B and Rule 42 of the Standing Rules. The meeting is being broadcast live. Can you put your on mute if you are not speaking, please? There's a lot of noise. Thank you. Meeting is being broadcast live on West Hartford Community Interactive, Comcast Channel 5, and Frontier Channel 6098, YouTube, as well as www.whctv.org, and will be available for on-demand viewing on the town's website. Due to the virtual format, main motions will be made by me. Some procedural items will be acted on by unanimous consent if there's no objection. Any counselor who wishes to speak at any point should raise their hand. Finally, a reminder to all participants to please identify yourself each time you speak and speak through the chair. We are going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, but before I want to say, begin the council meeting like all Pledge of Allegiance. But before I say these words tonight, I need to briefly say it is clearer now than ever that the phrase for liberty and justice for all rings hollow for too many throughout our country. For the entirety of American history, the promise of liberty and justice has not been fulfilled for Black people in our country. Black lives matter. Our country, and especially our criminal justice system, must change. We must do better. Let us say the pledge now, but as I do, I am focusing on the phrase liberty and justice for all. My own personal pledge to all of you tonight is that I will do everything I can to embrace this moment and this movement, to listen to Black voices, and to help strive toward a future where the words of the Pledge of Allegiance are a reality for Black people and all people of color in our community and our country. And now I will recite the pledge. If you can join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Ms. LeBron.
Ms. Blanks,
Present.
Ms. Cantor,
Here.
Mr. Davidoff,
Here.
Ms. Fay.
Here.
Mr. Gold,
Here.
Ms. Kerrigan,
Here.
Mr. Sweeney,
Here.
Mr. Winograd,
Here.
and Mr. Williams.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBro. We were going to start with some proclamations. And first, we have a guest with us today. The other proclamations are really for general public, and they've been mailed out, and they will be shared throughout the month. But today, I actually know Beth and know her family, and I'm thrilled to be able to hand off the proclamation to someone that knows her extremely well and really was very passionate about delivering this proclamation. So with that, Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It is with an absolute pleasure and honor today that I get to read this proclamation on behalf of Mrs. Sciarra, as I've known her since my kindergarten days at Morley. A little do most of you know, I know Dallas and Chris might know this, but the best man at my wedding was Beth's son, Andrew. And I grew up with all of her kids at Morley, and have known both her and Paul for years. And it is just an absolute honor. And she and Mr. Sciarra both have been such important parts of the West Hartford community and our families that demonstrate why people live here. And what some of you may not know is that Mrs. Sciarra is also a football guru, because every week she predicts that the New York Football Giants are going to win. And as a Giants fan, she is an adamant Giants fan. Her whole family is, as am I. But it is an absolute pleasure today to read the proclamation. So, with that, the Town of West Hartford Proclamation. Whereas Beth Sciarra is a lifelong resident of West Hartford and attending St. Timothy's Elementary and Middle School, Hall High School, and graduating from LaSalle University in Newton, Massachusetts, where she studied early childhood education. Whereas Beth Sciarra bought the preschool of West Hartford in 1994 from the 4 retiring women who originally founded the school in the late 1980s, and has been the director of the schools ever since. Whereas over the last 26 years, under the direction of Beth Sciarra, the preschool of West Hartford has promoted the development of the whole child socially, emotionally, generally, and physically, regardless of race, religion, ethnic, or background or abilities. Whereas in the unheard setting, children at the preschool of West Hartford have been encouraged to develop self-confidence and self-esteem, as well as learn to share and relate to others. Whereas over 26 years, nearly 1,000 children in 800 families have been part of the preschool of West Hartford community. And whereas Beth Sciarra will be retiring at the end of the 2019-2020 school year, capping over a quarter century of service in West Hartford and area children. Now therefore it be proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council of West Hartford and the residents of West Hartford, I, not Mary Cantor, Liam Sweeney, do hereby proclaim that June 9th is Beth Sciarra Day, and urge my fellow residents to recognize this incredibly important work of caring for and nurturing so many young children and families. And with that, I'm so honored to have declared this Beth Sciarra Day. Ms. Sciarra, I wish you all the best on your endeavors. I know I will see both you and Ms. Sciarra around town and hopefully soon. But I wish you all the best on the next phase of your life. And say hi to everyone for me. Say hi, Kelly and Dan, for me.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney, and thank you, Beth, for your incredible, deep contribution and ties to this community. We're so grateful for all that you have done for so many families. And we say, go enjoy the next 4 hours of Beth Sciarra Day. Is there anything that you would like to say?
Well, June 9, 2020 is Beth Sciarra Day. You make me feel like a queen today. So I thank you all for this wonderful endeavor. And good evening, Mayor, and to all the members of the Town Council. I am very overwhelmed and honored to receive this proclamation. Initially, when we talked about my retirement with my staff, we were going to have and host an open house with our families and former families and staff for a celebration. And as you all know, the virus hit and the event was canceled. But Chuck Corsi and Pam McDill were determined that my retirement would not go unannounced to the community in West Hartford. So I thank them both for initiating this proclamation tonight. Liam, it was extra special that you were able to read this proclamation to me. I have known you since you were a little boy, and this is really a very touching tribute. Thank you. The preschool of West Hartford was a very special place to me for 26 years. We were a community nursery school where over 98% of our students lived in town. We had wonderful families. And these families made friends in nursery school. Their children made friends in nursery school. And these families and friendships have continued their relationships even today. We rented the space at the Covenant Congregational Church, and I am most grateful to Pastor Tom Vandermeed and his congregation for their endless support of me and our nursery school. The job of being a director of a school is certainly not a one-person operation. I could not have run this school without the wonderful and nurturing employees over the years that I've had. They gave the children a strong foundation in their education and enriched many lives. I will treasure the many, many special memories and never forget this major chapter in my life. Thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
I'll clap I'll be the audio clap, but everybody's clapping. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mayor.
Be well, be healthy, enjoy this next chapter, and we wish many of your dreams to come true. So again, thank you for your incredible work with so many families and your community commitment. We really appreciate it. We appreciate you.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me tonight.
You're welcome. All right. Now we will move on. Thank you. Congratulations. Now we'll move on. The next proclamation is Asian American and Pacific Islanders. Whereas Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have a rich heritage, thousands of years old, and have been shaped by the history of the United States and had their lives dramatically influenced by moments in its history. Whereas there are more than 20 million Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in the United States, each day through their actions, they make America more vibrant, more prosperous, and more secure. Whereas our nation is particularly grateful to the many Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders who have served and are currently serving in our armed forces, protecting the nation, promoting freedom and peace around the world. Asian Pacific Americans made lasting contributions to America's wartime efforts, collected stories, highlight from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and Iraq. Whereas every May during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month and throughout the year, the National Park Service and its partners share those histories, and the continuing culture thriving in parks and communities today. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council of West Hartford, the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby proclaim this month of May National Asian Pacific Heritage Month, and this month, as we recall our hard-fought progress, let us resolve to continue moving forward. Together, let us ensure the laws respect everyone, civil rights apply to everyone. I call upon our residents to learn more about the history of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and to observe this month with appropriate programs and activities. And there are some activities that we will be joining later in the month virtually, of course. And the last proclamation that I have, and then I have a couple comments, whereas the town of West Hartford supports the rights of every citizen to experience equality and freedom from discrimination, and whereas the people, regardless of age, gender identity, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical challenges, have the right to be treated on the basis of their intrinsic value as human beings, and whereas the town of West Hartford believes a diverse population leads to a more vibrant community, and whereas we as a society are embracing new definitions of sexuality and gender, we must understand that the need for education and awareness remains vital to end discrimination and prejudice. And whereas June is National Pride Month to commemorate a riot in 1969 at the Stonewall Inn in Manhattan that is thought to be the beginning of the gay liberation movement in the United States. Whereas the town of West Hartford will raise the rainbow flag representing light, healing, sun, calmness, art, and spirit in front of City Hall for the most of the month of June. Now therefore be it proclaimed that on behalf of the Town Council of West Hartford and the residents of West Hartford, I, Mayor Sherry G. Cantor, do hereby proclaim June 2020 as Lesbian, Gay, Queer, Bisexual, Transgender Pride Month. I call upon our community to eliminate prejudice and bias everywhere it exists and to celebrate our diversity. And the last, just one more comment. As we recognize and celebrate the heritage and rights of different peoples, we need to also take a moment to consider the critically important national conversation taking place right now about injustice for our Black community members, neighbors, friends, colleagues, students, teachers, business owners, elected officials, etc. West Hartford stands with all people of color in the fight against racial injustice and inequality. We will not stand silent, and we intend to focus our efforts and resources to compassionately and constructively talk about these matters openly and honestly as we seek solutions. We will be meeting to determine a series of next steps and invite all residents to share their thoughts with us to ensure our solutions are broad and lasting. On behalf of West Hartford and all of our businesses, we are committed to a society that is diverse, inclusive, tolerant, and respectful. When members of our community hurt, we all hurt. West Hartford will not stand silent. Don't let today's injustice stop us from creating a better tomorrow for our community. And with that, we will go to approval of minutes. I would like to note that the original draft minutes of the May 26th meeting were missing the appointment of Sean Daly to the Conservation and Environment Commission. Mr. Daly's appointment is now reflected in the revised minutes that are attached to the agenda, and that's what we are voting on tonight. Without objection, I move that we approve the revised draft of the May 26, 2020 Town Council meeting. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, the motion is adopted. With Special Advisory Committee on Economic and Workforce Recovery, without objection, I move we receive these minutes from the May 28th meeting on the Economic and Workforce Recovery Special Advisory Committee. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, I move the motion is adopted. Without objection, I move that we receive the minutes from the May 20th meeting of the Special Advisory Committee of Economic and Workforce Recovery. Was that the same? No, yeah, the May 20th meeting, sorry. Is there any objection? Seeing there's no objection, the motion is adopted. And without objection, I move that we approve the minutes for the May 26th public hearing on the application for 1021, 1023 Farmington Avenue. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, the motion is adopted. Without objection, I move that we place items 5D and 5E on the consent calendar. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, I move that we place these items on the consent calendar. Oh, I'm sorry. I move adoption, right? I move those placed on the consent calendar. And now I move adoption of the consent calendar. Madam Clerk, we need a roll call for this.
Ms. Blanks.
Present.
Is that Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan? Ms. Kerrigan? Mr. Sweeney?
Here. Yes, sir. Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
We'll hold the vote for Ms. Kerrigan for a later time.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Could Councilor Blanks just clarify her vote and whether it was in the affirmative or the negative?
I'm sorry. That was a yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Blanks, and we will leave the vote open to hear back from Ms. Kerrigan. And then our next item is 5A, Town Manager Report. Mr. Hart.
Thank you, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. Good evening, Town Council and invited guests. I do have a couple of items I'd like to report on this evening. First of all, Mayor, building on your approach to addressing the systemic causes of racism, how we tackle that as a governing body and as an organization. That's something that's very important to me personally and to our leadership team as well. We've had a couple of recent conversations on the topic. One thing we will be doing at our level within the organization is conducting training around implicit and unconscious bias. I talked a little bit about this at our recovery committee meeting last week and how important this is for us to embark upon, as well as other actions that we can take to work with you to address the very important topic. I appreciated the good and comprehensive Public Safety Committee meeting we had earlier tonight. We also had a number of action items coming out of that discussion as well, and look forward to working with you in that venue also. Moving on to the next topic, some COVID-19 data. As of this afternoon, we had 676 cases here in West Hartford, as well as, unfortunately, 115 deaths. As horrible as that number may be, it has not increased significantly in recent days, the 115 deaths. So we will view that as positive news. Moving on to the next topic, our outdoor dining and retail initiative. I'm sure everyone's had a chance to drive through West Hartford Center on LaSalle and Farmington and see that we've put the infrastructure in place to allow this now. That went up in the center late last week. And today, actually, we set some infrastructure in Blueback Square, and more work in Blueback Square will continue this week. I really want to thank town staff for their great work to move on this quickly. A number of municipal departments were involved, as you know. Again, I appreciate the challenge that the mayor and the rest of you set out in front of us. Just looking at the applications we've received, I received a spreadsheet late this afternoon. At that point in time, we had received 43 applications for outdoor dining and retail. The vast majority are for outdoor dining. We had already approved 26 applications. And while most of them are in the center, others are in other locations as well. Just to cite a couple, Blue Plate Kitchen up in Bishop's Corner. We've got Effie's Place and Fernwood. We also have Red Robin over in Corbin's Corner. So we have received a number of applications already. World of Beer in Blueback Square. Very pleased with how this initiative is going thus far. Again, want to thank the team for their very good work to make this happen. Next item, I'm sure the council is familiar or somewhat familiar with the Federal CARES Act, which provides funding to local governments and a whole host of organizations nationwide. In Connecticut, because we don't have county government, in Connecticut, the state is administering those funds. And for municipalities, the state has created the Municipal Coronavirus Relief Fund, which they announced last week, and they're providing training on this week. And under that fund, municipalities in Connecticut will be able to apply for reimbursement for the 25% of COVID-related costs that the federal FEMA dollars will not cover. So that is very good news for us. We'll be able to submit an application at the end of this fiscal year, at the end of this quarter. The state, I believe, has committed $75 million for this statewide, and they will look to see what they can do the following fiscal year as well. A couple of more things for my report tonight, and I should have mentioned this when I was talking about outdoor dining and outdoor retail. Yes, we want, as we've talked about before, we want our residents, we want people to come and patronize our local businesses, but we also want to continue to do it in a safe and responsible way. So we do have some new signage that will be going up in the center. We've got some already, but we're going to be adding more signage, just reminding people of the importance of wearing face coverings, maintaining physical distancing, et cetera. So that's a very important message that we need to continue. The last item I wanted to touch on, Mayor, before I take any questions, is we are looking and working at, we're looking at reopening various municipal facilities, both outdoor recreational facilities, indoor recreational facilities, as well as other municipal buildings. A couple of things that we're working on now, or we worked on recently. The high school tracks we recently reopened with some appropriate signage. Our playgrounds have been closed for some time now. We're currently developing a recommendation that would allow us to reopen our playgrounds. Our basketball courts, that's still under review. Our playing fields, we are working with our baseball and other leagues. They need to submit plans to our Department of Leisure Services in terms of how they would conduct league play in a safe manner in compliance with state guidelines. We're reviewing the potential reopening of veteran skating rink. In Town Hall as well, we've recently issued guidance to all of our directors, our department heads. They are tasked with coming up with a plan for their individual departments that the municipal committee and I will review. And we're going to look at the potential to reopen Town Hall on probably on an appointment basis only to start late this month, early next month. And then last but certainly not least, we had a very good conversation last night at the Recovery Committee about the summer programs we plan to hold with both the library and in leisure services. In leisure services in particular, we are going to offer 2 in-person summer camps, one at Westmore Park and one at Elmwood Community Center with some time at Beachland Park. We're going to continue and provide a very robust virtual programming for all age groups over the course of this summer. We're going to be doing some exciting work in our parks, particularly to attract families, have games available for them, and we're going to look to establish, and we're already working on some exciting partnerships with our arts and other nonprofit organizations. That completes my report tonight, Mayor. Happy to take any questions you and other councilors may have.
Mayor Cantor, thank you, Mr. Hart. Any questions for the town manager? Mr. Gold.
Just more of a comment to Matt, through you, Mayor Cantor, I'm sorry, to Matt. I just wanted to commend you on the coordination of setting up LaSalle Road and eventually Blueback Square for these outcroppings, the table settings, the barriers. It was a colossal task that you needed to pivot and do in a quick way to accommodate the beginnings of an economic recovery in our town center. And I certainly appreciate that, and I applaud your team and the team's efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Hart, you want to follow up with that? I'll have a comment. Unmute, Ms. Matt. You're still on.
Sorry, Matt Hart, Town Manager. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Gold, for the comment. again, it's been a great team effort, and we have the right quarterback when it comes to setup with John Phillips, our Director of Public Works. He really knows how to get work like that done in an effective and efficient manner. So we really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Any other further questions? I couldn't agree more. It was really a team effort, but Mr. Phillips did so much, and he cared so much. He kept asking, what do you think? It was really wonderful, actually. And I've heard such positive feedback. So. Anybody else? All right. Now we will go to Corporation Council's report. Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And I also want to commend the staff for how quickly they were able to set that up in West Hartford Center. I actually went to LaSalle Road to watch part of it, and watching Mr. Phelps was like watching a general direct his troops. And so I think a lot of people might not realize that West Hartford is actually one of the few municipalities that has actually taken it upon itself to provide the infrastructure to restaurants free of charge in order to provide these new outdoor amenities. And so really West Hartford has been very forward thinking and progressive in this area, even in the face of the pandemic. My office continues to review the executive orders that are coming out from the Office of Governor. We do anticipate that phase 2 of the reopening will begin on June 17th when restaurants will be allowed to start providing indoor service. However, bar areas will still not be open. Hotels and lodging will also open. A number of personal services will be allowed to reopen, indoor recreation. Also sports clubs, complexes, gyms, fitness centers, and pools will be allowed to reopen. Outdoor arts and entertainment on a limited basis. Amusement parks, libraries, and museums and zoos and social clubs will all be allowed to reopen. And we have started to get some inquiries about sort of what the rules of the road will be. And the governor, while he's issued sector rules and guidance for some of these areas, we're still going to need to see the actual executive orders that implement some of these changes. So as an example, on sports and sports complexes, I know a few counselors have asked about that. And it does sound as though some sort of organized sports activity will be allowed on June 17th, but under current executive orders, contact sports and sports that involve shared equipment such as baseballs, footballs, basketballs, that sort of thing are still not allowed. So we will eagerly anticipate the governor issuing the further executive orders to implement these sector rules for phase 2 of the reopening. We do require an executive session tonight. However, I do not anticipate that the council will take any action after that. And so we will make a simultaneous motion to adjourn the public portion of the meeting at the same time that we go into executive session. And with that, Madam Mayor, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone on the council may have.
Again, Mayor Cantor, thank you, Mr. Dodge. Any questions for Corporation Council? I don't see any. I'm sure we'll have some for you later. All right, now we are very fortunate to have 2 special guests, 2 incredibly professional, hardworking registrar of voters, Beth Kyle and Patrice Peterson. Obviously, the pandemic presents an unprecedented challenge, and I know and I know that they are both committed to ensuring that every West Hartford resident is able to cast a vote in a way that is healthy and safe. I would like now to invite Ms. Kyle and Ms. Peterson, I'm not sure which order, but to make a presentation on what their office is doing to prepare for the upcoming elections. At the end of their presentation, I will open the floor to any counselors who might have questions or comments. Ms. Kyle, Ms. Peterson, thank you for your service to the town of West Hartford, and the floor is yours. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Okay, Ms. Kyle, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Cantor, Town Council, and guests. I am Beth Kyle, the Republican Registrar of Voters. I will be presenting today with my colleague, Patrice Peterson. I will take the first section of the report, and then she will report on the second portion. I want to say we're going to be speaking today primarily totally about election in this time of the pandemic. As with every election, the primary goal of the registrars of voters is providing a safe environment for our voters, our poll workers, and ensuring voter accessibility, as well as certifying the accuracy of our vote tally. With that being said, once we started hearing about COVID back at the end of February, we reached out to the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, as well as West Hartford's Office of Emergency Management, just to begin talking about what the plan might be. We thought there might be issues with the primary that was going to be in April, that was subsequently moved to June, that's now been to August. So we have been having conversation about this for many, many months. That being said, I do want to thank a number of people who've helped us. I mentioned West Hartford Bloomfield Health District, Office of Emergency Management, Plant and Facility Services, Corporation Counsel, the Police Department, Information Technology, the Town Manager, the Office of the Superintendent, the Office of the Town Clerk, as well as the Town Council. And that's a very long list, but it gives you an idea of how many people in town are, even if it's just a small portion, involved in the election process, and how important it is and how many moving parts there are for us to organize to ensure the safety of the election process. So during the pandemic, it is very important that voters and poll workers both feel safe while at the polls and have confidence in our process. In coordination with the Secretary of State, we have had weekly calls. Sometimes they've not been weekly if there's not been new information for them to share with us, but all town clerks and registrars from the 169 towns have been involved in those calls with Denise Merrill and her deputies and her attorneys and all the other staff who have information to provide us. We've been involved in those calls, and we've developed guidelines that protect the health of our voters and our poll workers in the polling places and provide accessibility of our elections to all qualified electors despite the presence of the global pandemic. So I'm going to give you some highlights of what we're going to do. It is going to be a lot of information, but I think it's very important for you to all hear the details. Certainly feel free to ask me any questions that you have at the end. So with regard to plan for voting at the poll places, that's where I'm going to start today. General polling information is that we will maintain our 9 current polling locations, our current polling places. There is an option to consolidate. We are choosing not to do that because we want to be able to maintain social distancing. And our concern and the direction of the Secretary of State is if you are forced to combine polling locations, you may have trouble with social distancing, which we certainly want to maintain. With that in mind, the polling place for District 4, which was formerly located at the Elmwood Community Center, will now be located at Charter Oak International Academy at 425 Oakland Ave. This change is to ensure enough space for social distancing within the voting area. We need to make sure that the polling booths are far enough away so that people feel secure voting there. We need to make sure our staff is available to be distanced enough, and we need to have an entrance and an exit that is separate, and Elmwood Community Center was a challenging location for that in that regard. Voters registered in that district will be notified of this change via mail, but all other polling locations will remain the same. The occupancy at each polling location will be capped at 50%. There will be a separate entrance and exit, as I mentioned, at each polling location, and at each of those entrances and exits, a poll worker will keep a tally of the number of people entering and exiting to ensure the flow and maintain a safe capacity. This capacity requirement may cause a line to start at the entrance of the polls. It's not something that we've really ever had before, even at our busiest times, but it may result this time in a wait time for voters. We do feel that this is an important piece, though, in order to maintain the 50% capacity that's been recommended by the Secretary of State. And we ask that all voters prepare for a possible wait time and understand that the capping capacity at each polling location is crucial, really crucial to maintaining proper social distancing. Voters will be required to wear masks in order to enter the polling location, unless doing so, of course, would be contrary to his or her health or safety due to a medical condition. If a person declines to wear a mask, we will try and work out the possibility of helping them with what's considered curbside voting outside of the polling district. And we'll talk to them. We certainly would never, they will certainly be able to vote that day. Each polling location will have touch-free hand sanitizer stations at the entrance and the exit. There will be signage reminding people to wash their hands before and after they cast their vote. We will have clearly marked 6-foot spacing on the floor. At the official checker table, that's the person who checks you in when you come in, make sure that they check your identification, as well as other high traffic areas as in front of the voting tabulator, which is where you put your ballot in. And we're going to provide ways to encourage 6-foot spacing in lines outside the polls as well. We're going to have signage and floor markings to direct voters and limit bottlenecks to encourage spacing and flow in high density areas, walkways to and from the voting booths, privacy booths. The accessible voting system machine and the voting tabulator will be one way to minimize spacing. We will maximize space between the voting privacy booths to be at least 6 feet apart. And the poll workers will be separated from the voters using either a plexiglass shield or a face shield. With regard to staffing the polls, each poll worker will be provided with PPE to include face masks, gloves, and a face shield. Some areas will be protected with a plexiglass sneeze guard as well. There will be hand washing breaks scheduled for the poll workers at a minimum of every 2 hours, and they will also be provided with hand sanitizer. All poll workers will be receiving their training because this is definitely different for them than what we typically do. But training is a concern because we can't have large groups of people. So training will be done via Zoom with the ROV staff, and we're working in conjunction with the Secretary of State to work on that. The training will include, of course, all the safety protocols that we've talked about today. The staffing at each polling location will be minimized. This is for a few reasons. One, we want to minimize the amount of people in the polling location since we are capped at a 50% capacity. That does include poll workers. Also, there are several poll workers who may not feel comfortable and have communicated to us that they do not feel comfortable working at the polls. And we understand that and we respect their decision. So we are going to have one moderator, 2 assistant registrars, 2 official checkers who will also work as the ballot clerk. They will perform a dual role, 1 tabulator tender. We will have 2 people assigned outside the polling location to direct foot traffic, to assist in maintaining proper capacity and social distancing outside the polls. And 1 will be stationed at the entrance and 1 at the exit, and they will have radios to be able to communicate with each other and to communicate with the moderator inside. There will be 1 person dedicated only to cleaning the polling location throughout the voting hours, cleaning the poll booths, the pens that are used, the light switches, doorknobs, bathrooms, the IVS machine, and common areas. And there will be a police officer at each polling location. We're just want to have that for the purpose of safety for all of the residents. So let's move on to disinfecting the polling equipment and the polling place. Designated staff, as I talked about, will be cleaning and disinfecting the voting equipment, tabulators, polling booths routinely. Tables and the voting booths and other surfaces that the public are using on that day will need to be infected throughout the day. So every time somebody comes in with their ballot to vote at a polling booth and they leave, that polling booth is going to be disinfected. The restrooms at the polling place will be adequately supplied with soap and water, paper towels, and routinely cleaned as well. Each voter will receive a pen on the way in. And the receipt of their ballot, they will also get their own individual pen. Typically, the pens are at the voting booth. We are not going to have any pens at the voting booth. All pens will then be turned back. After they cast their ballot, they will be put into a container. No one will be touching them, and then they will be disinfected before use by the next voter. The voters are permitted to bring their own pen if they want, as long as it's blue and or black. The bad news is that we're not going to be able to give away our unvoted today stickers, which is really very upsetting for everybody, and they really love the stickers, but we do think for the purposes of containing any kind of possible germs, we're going to eliminate all of the voting stickers. This is our plan for August. This is the plan that we will be turning in. It's called our Safe Polling Plan to the Secretary of the State. We have put together this plan after many, many weeks of conversation and direction from the Secretary of State. It took a very long time for us to get information from them. They did not provide that to us on a timely manner, but I don't think they had it all figured out. I think the target is constantly changing. We changed originally from April, as I said, to June until now in August. And in the meantime, there was a lot of information that needed to be determined. So we're very pleased with this. We think it's a very reasonable plan. We've been in conversation with other registrars throughout the state. And I can entertain any questions now specifically about the polling location while they're top of mind, or we can wait until after Patrice gives her information about absentee ballot information. And if we'd like to do that, whatever works for the group.
We will do questions after. It's just
wonderful.
That way.
Perfect. Perfect. So I'm going to have Patrice take over the next part.
It has to go through me, but thank you, Ms.
Sorry. Sorry. First timer.
Yeah, no, Ms. Peterson, and now it's up to you. Just make sure that you state your name too.
My name is Patrice Peterson, and I am the Democratic Registrar of Voters. And I thank you, Mayor Cantor, Town Council members, my fellow registrar, and the citizens of West Hartford for this opportunity. As you know, on March 20th, Governor Lamont issued Executive Order 7QQ. Maybe people didn't know the number, but that's the number that had outlined the changes for absentee voting. And specifically, this executive order changes the eligibility qualifications for absentee voting during a pandemic. So they're greatly modified. The General Statute Section 9135, which allows anyone who may be affected by COVID-19 to be able to vote by absentee ballots. And that interpretation is incredibly broad, so that anybody affected you can be affected in a whole host of ways. You can be at risk, you could be at risk because you have anxiety about it. But in any case, there's a very broad definition now of how you are affected by the illness of COVID-19. So we will see a number of people absentee voting that we never saw before. The other big change for us for absentee voting is Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7A, which limits who can enter a nursing home, assisted living, or independent living facilities. As a result, we will not have supervised voting opportunities, which we've been required to hold in the past. And West Hartford has 11 of these facilities where supervised voting generally takes place. The appropriately registered residents of these facilities will receive absentee ballot applications just as any other voter. The Registrar of Voters office is working with the administrators of these facilities to assist them in this new process by phone and by email. So with the guidance of the Secretary of State's office, the process used by the Town Clerk's office and Registrar of Voters office is going to look dramatically different for absentee ballots. And the thing to remember is that whatever I say is effective today, because changes, clarifications, recommendations, and guidance seem to change every day and sometimes every hour. As a matter of fact, as Beth and I were preparing this report, we're not kidding. As we are hitting send, a new guideline came through from the Secretary of State's office, literally came through as we were hitting send. It just changes all of the time. The absentee ballot application and mailing process is going to happen this way. Within the next 2 weeks, Secretary of State's office, using a mail house from out of state, from Rhode Island, I believe, will be sending absentee ballots applications to every registered Democrat and Republican in Connecticut. In West Hartford, that means approximately 29,000 voters who are registered in the two parties will receive an absentee ballot application. The applications will include prepaid return envelopes. The complicated applications will be then sent to the town clerk's office. Town clerk staff will process those applications. And since we're not reporting specifically on the work that SE and the registrar, we're speaking specifically about the registrar of voters, we're not going to detail the work that needs to be done by SE and the town clerk's office. That application process is separate from the work of the registrar of voters office. The absentee ballots will not be available until July 19th, and they will also be sent daily through the mail house that has been hired by the Secretary of State's office. The completed ballots will be sent, also will be pre-postage paid with an envelope. Those completed ballots will be sent back to the town clerk's office, or they can be delivered in person to the ballot deposit box, which the Secretary of State's office is providing to all towns, and ours will be installed at Town Hall in a secure location outside. I don't think we've determined where that's going to be yet, but it allows people to not do it by mail. And if they're running late, they can deliver it to the ballot box outside the town hall. The completed ballots are then going to the clerk's office and can be delivered in person. They will be recorded and stored in the town clerk's office until Election Day, August 11th. On a few days prior to August 11th, all of the absentee ballots must be individually counted by district with the town clerk, her deputy, and both Beth and myself. Potentially, this could take hours to complete, as we're talking about a potential 29,000 voters. In 2016, we had about a 47% turnout between the Democrats and the Republicans. So even if it's half, Beth and myself and the town clerk and her staff will be spending a lot of time individually counting these envelopes. On primary day, the absentee ballots will be counted. We will not be able to count them beforehand. The statute requires that the counting may not begin prior to 10 a.m. In West Hartford, we count all of our ballots centrally for absentees. We use Town Hall, and we do not go to the local polling places. That would just make things more complicated there. We don't want to do that. So that means that we are going to have a number of changes in how we all deal with absentee ballots. Our staffing is going to change. Due to the anticipated significant increase in the number of absentee ballots, we will be hiring more poll workers than we typically do, but we can't predict how many more we need to hire yet because we don't have an estimated number of absentee ballots yet that are going to be issued. We'll know that in July when we know how many people have applied for those ballots. All poll workers that will be counting will be given the proper PPE equipment as recommended by CDC. All the guidelines for safety will be in place for those workers, and they are significantly less than what we will see in the polling place since there's no public contact. They'll all be in contact with each other 6 feet apart, but not to the general public. The poll workers will receive their training on their new process also through Zoom with Beth and myself, and that will include all the safety protocols. The statute requires that the vote count must be completed by midnight on the night of the election. So you can understand that our most serious concern is that given the number of steps that's required to count an absentee ballot and the anticipated large number of absentee ballots, that vote count is going to be very difficult to complete in the current time constraints. And I hope that that's being looked at and how we can fix that and make it more workable for us and for the voters. In order to expedite the process, we normally use one tabulator. We'll be using up to 4 tabulators, and we will be, hopefully that will help expedite things and we're going to team people up in a different way. This is going to be very different than other elections, and I suspect that that's what we're going to see to have happen in November as well. So we are committed to having every absentee ballot vote counted accurately. The several changes and challenges ahead to make this run smoothly are going to be difficult, but it's something that Beth and I are very conscious of and that we're working on it pretty much a daily. It's the thing we lose sleep over. Secretary of State has relaxed some of the reporting deadlines in each municipality in preparation for this large number of ABs, but we're waiting for further discussion on that matter in one of our phone calls. We will continue to work with the Secretary of State's office and the town clerk's office and with our professional association. So all of this means more money, unfortunately. So I want to talk about that, the fun part, right? The money. And we have a number of changes, a lot more money involved, and we don't even know, we're still working on that number and gathering that information. But through the Secretary of State's office, there is federal money available to reimburse the town of West Hartford or any city or town that applies that is very specific to the costs of the additional costs in running the election. So we know what we normally have budgeted, but this is for those increased costs. All of the things that Beth and I have been speaking about are increased costs. So we will be working with the Secretary of State's office closely. We're working with the town manager and the town clerk's office to get our application complete to be able to send into the Secretary of State for approval, and we hope to get that done by the end of this week, June 12th. The intent is to recoup every possible imaginable dollar associated with the increased cost of the election. We don't need the exact costs at this time because there are too many unknown variables, like how many absentee ballot workers do we need? However, we are identifying those areas where we know there are increased costs. We don't need to apply for the reimbursement dollar amount until after the election when we have a true total number to get reimbursed. So at least we're not guessing, and we'll be able to ask for reimbursement for a real number, which I think is a good thing. The additional costs are in a few different areas. Personnel costs, obviously, additional poll workers, public safety officials. The West Hartford Police Department is assigning one officer per polling location to assist in keeping lines orderly and to keep things moving along. The West Hartford Police Department has always supported us in the past on an as-needed basis. However, given the circumstances, the Registrar of Voters Office has requested their support in advance, and Chief Reddick has been more than willing to help us out there. School staff, we are going to have eight out of our 9 polling places are in West Hartford schools. With the CDC recommendation for cleaning of the voting privacy booths between every voter and the pens and everything that has to happen, the school staff's already properly trained on how to disinfect correctly in a school. And so we are going to be able to use the people who normally clean in a school to work with us on election day and to make sure that all happens in an appropriate way for a school environment as well. And that cost, there at the end of it, there also is a deep cleaning that's required, and the cost of that deep cleaning is also reimbursable. So we're putting those numbers together. All the PPE equipment is included in things that are reimbursable. So we are going to have everything that the CDC recommends, as well as whatever the health district recommends in terms of mask, gloves, hand sanitizer, sneeze guards. All workers, all absentee ballot workers will just be offered gloves and masks, since that's all they need, and hand sanitizer. Extra masks will need to be available for voters who arrive without one. Hand sanitizer stations are being set up at the entrance and exit of every polling location. And I have no idea how expensive those are, but I found out today that they can run up to $250 a piece, and we need like 20 of them. It should be noted that the Secretary of State's office has purchased some PPE kits for poll workers, but we don't know what that equipment looks like. We don't know how many we're going to receive, and adjustments, once we know, then we will make the appropriate adjustments. And we're working very closely with the public health district to make sure that what we get is appropriate and of good quality for our safety. Other equipment, materials, Secretary of State's office recommended that enough ballots be ordered for an 80% turnout. That's a significantly larger number than we had anticipated, and we have to pay for those extra ballots. As I said before, it was a 47% turnout last time. In 2016, we have no idea what's going to happen this time, but we're all going to be ordering 80%. Memory cards, the cards that go into the tabulator, are expensive, and we are going to be increasing the number of tabulators needed. We're increasing our mailing, especially because of moving the 4th district polling place, and additional pens. I mean, we're ordering thousands of pens. We are going to have additional signage so voters know where to go, they know where to stand, they have the 6 feet apart. Tape or appropriate signage for marking off the floor will also be available, and we're very cognizant that we will be getting material that will not damage rugs and floors in schools. In conclusion, preparing for an election under a pandemic environment is complicated and it's uncertain. The rules seem to change almost daily, with many outstanding details yet to be determined. As previously stated, running this election is not possible without a large team of town departments supporting the effort, and we are so grateful for the support and professional advice from town manager, town finance, town facilities, town corporation council, the health district, the police department, school administrators, emergency management, the list goes on and on. Thank you to the citizens who have been calling us, offering to work at the polls, which is very nice for us to get those phone calls, and the applications that they've been coming in. Would also like to thank the Registrar of Voters staff, with our deputy Registrar of Voters and our office administrator, that have kept the office running during these unusual times. Most of all, we thank the voters of West Hartford for their patience as we try to answer their questions, which come daily, and answer them in an efficient way, explaining to them that things change on a daily basis, but what we're telling them is true for that day. But we thank them for their call. We thank them for their commitment to being good voters and good citizens. And especially with the date of the election moving twice, I had a phone call today from somebody who said, wasn't the election supposed to be June 2nd? Why didn't I hear more about it? So we still are working to communicate that, but we thank the citizens for helping us out. And as always, we're committed to holding an election that's safe and where every vote is accurately counted. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patrice. You made it very, very, very clear that these are unprecedented times and the challenges are great. There was a lot of good information in there, and I know that things might change again, but we know that this is but the most important thing, the most fundamental right is for everyone to vote and have their vote counted. We appreciate that very, very much. My husband decided to wash a pot, so I'm sorry. There's a lot of stuff. Okay, so with that, I'll open the floor up to the council. Any questions? Ms. Fay, thank you. Ms. Fay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I have two questions, Beth. One for you and then one for Patrice. And thank you very much for your presentations. They were excellent and very, very thorough. And I really, really appreciated hearing the processes. So Beth, one question I had for you first was just a simple process one. So if people our lines are going to be pretty long, perhaps at the locations, how are you going to establish the hours? You're going to have a cutoff at 9 o'clock, I believe it is, 8 o'clock. Do people have to be in the building by then, or do they just have to be in line? How are you going to monitor that? I guess that would be my first question for you.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Ms. Kyle?
Yes. The polling, I keep being put on mute. I'm so sorry. I have no idea why. The polling hours are the same as they are during a normal election. So they're 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. The rule for voting in a polling location is if you are in line by 8 p.m., then you are eligible to vote. So this is part of why we're going to be having poll workers outside at the entrance, as well as police, because that's how we monitor. So come 8 o'clock, the poll worker, if there is a line, and I did say that there could be a line, but we're not sure. Again, hard to know. If everyone votes absentee ballot, there will be fewer people at the polls. Likely people will come across a line at some point simply because of the capacity cap that's put on there. But we will have someone stand at the back of the line at 8 o'clock. And if someone tries to come in, we will have to let them know that unfortunately it's 8 o'clock and they have missed the opportunity to get in line.
Thank you, Ms. Kyle. Ms. Fay, you had a follow-up question?
Yes, just a real short one. And this one is Mary Fay, Town Councilor through Mayor Cantor. This is for Patrice, Ms. Peterson. One of the questions that I've been reading about is sometimes the voter rolls might not be current. What processes do you have in place to make sure that our active voter list is up to date with, the scrubs for deceased people and people who have moved out of town, things like that? Thank you.
We have spent.
Ms. Peterson, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor. We've spent an extraordinary amount of time while the offices are being closed, being in the office, making sure that the lists are as accurate as possible, to the point, very sadly, of bringing in the Hartford Current obituary page, which has been a horrible thing to have to do. But we've been following very carefully. We completed a canvass of the voters who haven't voted recently to make sure that they still wanted to be active voters. And we turn around registrations and we turn around changes of address within a couple of days right now. Sometimes our mail hasn't gone out as quickly as it has in the past, but people are getting their confirmation within a week or so. It is a daily activity to make sure. That is something that we do worry about with the applications being sent out by a third party, that the list that they get from us is accurate as possible. And it is a daily process that we are working on.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Anything further, Ms. Fay?
No, thank you very much to both of you.
Thank you. And just remember, when you're not talking, to mute, because then there's echoes and background noises. So any other questions for the registrars? Okay, Mr. Davidoff. Oh, sorry, Ms. Blanks. I'm sorry. Let me do Ms. Blanks first, and then Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. So my question, I guess it could be directed to either of you regarding the 4th polling district being relocated, or you know what I mean, change of location. So my question is, what type of messaging or signage, how soon will that get out to those particular voters?
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Davidoff actually texted me that question too. So good. Maybe the same question. Who would like to take that? Just raise your hand and I'll call on you. Okay, Ms. Kyle, go ahead.
Okay, yes, good question. We will be sending out a mailing, which will be a postcard. We're actually working with facilities to get a map of the area so that people will be able to see where they park, where the entrance will be, where the exit will be. That will go to every registered voter in that district. We will be providing signs outside the Elmwood Community Center that day that will let people know the address and the whereabouts. It's going to be posted outside of our office, which is a requirement. No one's really going in there right now. It will be on our website, and we are going to be putting it on the West Hartford Community Television Station. We're going to reach out to Ronnie Newton at weha.com, put it on places like West Hartford Friends and Neighbors on Facebook, which a lot of people follow. We will put it in the patch, in the Hartford Current. There's going to be a lot of information about that change.
Thank you, Ms. Kyle. Ms. Blanks, anything further?
Just to follow up, I'm sorry, forgive me if you said this. How far in advance are you planning to create that messaging?
Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Ms. Kyle?
So we are just finishing the final information that we need to have on the card. And then as soon as we can get that printed out, it's probably within the next week or two that we'll be sending that out. That part. The rest of it will come after we initially send the mailing out. We know that's in the mail, then we're going to put the announcement out to all of the papers. And it won't be a one-time piece of information. It's going to be something that we do on a repeated basis. That's.
Thank you, Ms. Kyle. Ms. Blanks, anything further?
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much. And I think Mr. Davidoff has also had his hand up. Go to you, Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you to the two registrars. I did print out the report, read the report. It was quite thorough in terms of some of the steps that are going to be taken. Just want to touch base about the change in the 4th voting district. In order to avoid confusion, I really think we also need to let other people know that there's no change in the other people. Okay, so that people aren't buying by not. A lot of people don't know what that means by being the average West Hartford citizen. They don't know that. I think that's quite important in the sense that there is likely to be a House legislative race that involves the 4th district, and I think that message definitely has to be out there. Now, I'm also certain that when people, so that's that issue. I'm certain that when people start getting these absentee ballot applications, there's going to be a lot of confusion and uncertainty. People are going to say, I didn't request one. I've never voted absentee. I've always voted in person. So we're mailing out, the state of Connecticut's mailing out 29,000 of these to people in town. I'm certain there's going to generate some type of interest in finding out, why did I get this? What do I do with this? So my question is, what steps are we going to have to be ready to field these inquiries? Okay, because you two obviously have the expertise to understand the process, to be able to accurately answer the questions of the people who are going to inquire. And I think it's something that people are going to want an immediate response to, not we'll call you back in 3 days. So I understand that these are being mailed out the 21st. And by the time some people may get them, because I don't think they're going first class mail, I don't know if I'm right or wrong, but if they go bulk mail, people could get them well after the 4th of July and give them like 30 days left. So I just want to understand logistically how that's going to work. And then my last question is, that could be a lot of ballots, okay, to do. And what physical space do we have in town hall should people choose to exercise that option of voting absentee ballot? Because I think there needs to be a plan as to the space as to where we're going to keep them, store them, and how people are going to, you said you need to count them before election day to make certain that the number is accurate. Have you identified the spaces and coordinated those hours with the town clerk? I understand that you have individualized and specialized areas with respect to that. I'd like to hear what plans are there. And then my last question, I'm sorry for having a bunch of questions, but this is pretty important, especially when it comes to voting, is I understand that you're going to be submitting to the Secretary of State's office a budget for reimbursable expenses. And we just recently had a special committee meeting, and we had the person who's the major contact to the Secretary of State, Mr. Weningrad's wife, Ms. Wegley, on the call. And I asked the question as to whether or not there would be adequate funds available for reimbursement. And if I recall, the reply was it's uncertain as to whether or not there would be enough funds to accomplish that. So if that's the case, I would respectfully request that West Hartford get its invoice or whatever it's going to be in early, okay? So that the early birds gets the worm, and we're not wondering whether or not we're going to get reimbursable dollars. So those are my three concerns: the changing of the location, the storage, and how that's going to be manning as well as manning the hours at Town Hall to give people accurate information, and then the reimbursement. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We'll start with Ms. Peterson. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll answer all three questions. The first question about people being confused and having a lot of questions, we had anticipated that, and in coordination with the clerk's office and with the town, we're putting in a hotline that is going to be manned every day, all 5 days a week, all the business hours. The hotline is going to be live manned between the clerk's staff and the Registrar of Voters staff. So every day of the week, on all business hours, that will be a live phone line where people can ask a question, and hopefully we'll be able to give them the appropriate answer. And we're already getting the phone calls every day. So between the clerk's office and our office, I would say, well, in our office, probably 90% of the phone calls I answer are about my absentee ballot and how is it going to work. So it is something, this hotline, we hope it's going to be a separate number that we will be putting out to the public so they'll know that this is available to them. And hopefully that will be live, especially just a little bit before we know that the applications are being sent out. Once they know they're sent out, then we know we need to be live on this hotline. The second question is in terms of space. I know that SE in the town clerk's office has identified storage space because we normally don't have these numbers, and we're going to be getting special bins that the clerk's office is ordering, and that we're going to use the auditorium for counting the absentee ballots, and we're going to be using the town council chambers on August 11th for the polling location. So instead of going all the way down the hall, they're only going to go partway down the hall and take a left into town council chambers because the auditorium is the only space that we have that's big enough to be able to accommodate the number of people that we're going to need to count these absentee ballots. So that's the answer to that question. And yeah, we totally get how 40 years in state service, I totally get how that budget money disappears quickly. And we're putting together pretty good numbers right now. The big number we're actually meeting with town manager and with the town clerk tomorrow to go over more of the numbers that we've been able to put together. The big number for us is going to be that we don't know how many poll workers we're going to need for absentee ballots. So the rest of it, we're being able to at least put a ballpark on. So we'll have some kind of an idea, but we cannot submit for the reimbursement until after the election. But yeah, we are right on top of that one. We know how that money works.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. I think the one other question that Mr. Davidoff had was, how are other people going to know that their polling locations haven't changed? I don't know if you wanted to answer that too. And then
all right. I think Beth wants to answer that.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kyle?
Yes, so that's a great recommendation, Mr. Davidoff. And when we send out the notifications to the press and on our website, we will make sure that we clarify that information. It is very important that people understand that their polling locations will not change. So we appreciate that message and hear that loud and clear. One thing I do want to just clarify, the absentee ballot piece is always tricky, and I know you alluded to that in your questions, Mr. Davidoff. Part of it is in the town clerk's purview, and part of it is ours. So everything that happens before they are turned over to us at 10 a.m. is the town clerk's purview at this point. So where she is going to be processing the applications that come in, and where she is going to be processing the ballots that come in would probably be a better question for her. I do believe she has been looking at using the auditorium in Town Hall, but then where it's stored, those pieces are also her purview. So I can't give an exact answer because I don't want to speak for her. Once we get them at 10, we will also be using, as Patrice said, the auditorium. And that's kind of where that transfer comes to us. And then we are responsible for tallying them in the tabulators. And then they do get stored back after they're voted into the town clerk. So we do not maintain those ballots as we maintain the other ballots that are voted at the polls.
Thank you, Ms. Kyle. Mr. Davidoff, anything further? Okay, thank you, Mr. Davidoff. Mr. Gold. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor, and through you to either Beth or Patrice. A lot of the information you gave us, which was almost over-inclusive, and I appreciate that, failed to address one thing which was brought up by Beth, which is the lines that could form outside. While you're concerned about safety and everything in terms of social distancing on the inside, if lines form, how will the registrar address those issues when that happens?
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Ms. Kyle?
So we will, part of that is the polling staff that we're going to be having out there. The poll workers will be not only responsible for who is coming in, but making sure that they are maintaining proper social distance. We will have marks on the ground, similar to what you've seen probably in Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. When you're going into a store, there will be marks on the floor. There will be signage out there to say, please make sure that you maintain social distancing, similar to the signs that are in town right now. So that's how we will be making sure that people are doing that outside of the polls as well.
Thank you. Ms. Peterson, you want to take a piece of that question too?
Yes. Mr. Gold, I think that the other part of your question is, what do we do if the lines are really long? Well, we do have some flexibility. Fortunately, we've got great, wonderful poll workers that when we train them, we cross-train them for different tasks. And we also say, this is where you're assigned, but we've been known to have to move people around. And we keep, on a regular election, we keep track of how things are going in every polling place all the time. So if one polling place were a little slow and another polling place was out of control with a line, we will shift staff. We will ask them to move from one location to another during the day, which hopefully will help move things along. And we'll be able to know where the bottleneck is.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Anything further, Mr. Gold? Okay, Mr. Williams, I see your hand.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to follow up on one quick point that was raised by Mary towards the end. And that's with respect to the Secretary of State affirmatively sending out application to voters that we have in our rolls, that creates sort of an issue because as Patrice, and by the way, thank you both for your presentation. Great job, very thorough. But as Patrice mentioned, part of what you guys do to ensure that we have clean rolls is to look at obituaries, right? You manually go through the obituary. You have access to interstate registries, right? But it's an imperfect system. And so just so that what I'd like you to speak to is the idea or the probability that applications, not actual ballots, but applications are going to be sent to people in West Hartford who are no longer here. Is that a fair conclusion to come to?
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Ms. Kyle, first.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Williams. That could happen. That absolutely could happen. The process for someone who moves out of state, for instance, to let us know that they have to write to us, and we need to receive a letter signed by them that says that they would like to be taken off the voter rolls. There is a process right now that is spearheaded by the Secretary of State, started several years ago, called ERIC. And I apologize, I don't know what ERIC stands for, but it is the process where states will let other states know when they have new voters registered that they know used to be in our state. Okay, so someone who moves to Vermont, if Vermont finds out that they were previously registered in the state of Connecticut, they will let the Secretary of State of Connecticut know, and then we will get that on a monthly basis that there has been someone that has changed. And in that case, since it's coming from the Secretary of State and they have confidence that it's true, we can make that person inactive on our rolls. So they will not show up as an active voter. And that's the list that the Secretary of State will be using. However, if that is not captured, and that is not 100% guaranteed, if that is not captured by that state, or if that state is not involved in ERIC, and I don't believe it's 100% of the states right now, then that is a distinct possibility that you will get someone who moved away and is still registered in the town of West Hartford. We do canvass, which Patrice spoke about, but if they just moved, they could possibly have missed the canvass. So if someone moved a couple of weeks ago after our canvass was completed and they had voted back in November, they will receive absentee ballot application, not the ballot, to their old address. And it could be that two people who moved in, who registered the minute that they moved into the house, will also be receiving their absentee ballot application. So they will get 4, 2 to the previous owners and 2 to the current owners. Of course, filling out an application with someone else's name is illegal. There is, unfortunately, and I think that Essie has spoke about this in the other meeting, there's no signature verification right now with regard to absentee ballots. So, and Essie could speak better to that piece, but there definitely is a chance that someone who passed away that was not captured either for an e-search. The obituaries are not the only way we do it. There's an e-search that we do on a regular basis that tracks all of the deaths, but we can only find out the deaths that are the most recent that we find that are registered as West Hartford residents. There will be some people who slip through the cracks through no fault of ours or the state's. That's just the way the policy is right now.
Ms. Thomas Peterson, do you want to, is there anything further or no?
What Beth said is correct. I don't think that we think it's going to be a large number of people, yet it is absolutely possible. I think that one of the groups that could be affected are college citizens who go to school in Connecticut, and so they may be registered in Mansfield if they go to UConn. So their application will be going to their UConn address because that's where they're registered. So if we do have, for example, a college student who is now living home and maybe doing the beginning of next semester at home, they would need to re-register for West Hartford in order to be able to get that application. So we're going to see that happen as well. And then the other piece of it is that if we should, I know that this has happened that, and again, I don't want to speak for Essie's process, but if they get notified after it's been sent and they become aware of it, they go in and they pull that application or that ballot. But there are definitely going to be there's definitely the possibility that there are going to be people falling through the cracks, and they're going to get, there may also be people who move within town and don't tell us. So, people who change apartments or people who change addresses, some people move on the same street. And if they don't notify us that they've moved even within town, then we're going to see that back up with ballot applications And that is one of those other things that does keep us up at night. We don't think it's a huge number, but it could happen. Or I think it is going to happen. I think it's a certainty.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. All right, anything further, Mr. Williams? No. Okay. Any other questions, comments? All right, we still have a long way to go on our meeting. So thank you both for your work, your commitment, all the information. You are both experts at what you do, and we're very appreciative of the service and the importance that you put on your jobs and how seriously you take it, because it is the most important American job. So thank you so much. All right, and with that, you don't have to stay for any more of the meeting. Thank you. Bye-bye. Go have dinner. Okay, thank you. Now we will go to unfinished business. And I'd like to make a motion to adopt a resolution calling on the state to expand voting options. And this is the resolution that we talked about in the Special Advisory Committee, talking about the ability of people to have the opportunity to vote based on the rules for August that also would apply to November, and potentially a system that would allow for people to have that option to vote absentee in no excuse way, similar to the 36 states that already have it. Connecticut being in a small minority of states that have restricted absentee voting rights. Okay, anybody want to talk to that? Mr. Winograd?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
I don't know if you raised your hand or not. I wasn't sure.
I did.
Okay.
I got the angle bad, so I couldn't get my hand up. I am. Thank you very much. And yes, I do like to speak on this ordinance, this resolution. I want to go back a little bit. I think, well, two things I want to say. One historical and one sort of capturing the present moment. The history of voting rights is one that is intermixed with the history of race in this country. And while the COVID crisis and certainly the push right now for increased absentee ballot voting was not directly related, certainly, to racial issues, the issue of the vote has always been. And especially since the Voting Rights Act was defanged by the Supreme Court. Voting is so fundamental, obviously, to our democracy, and it is constantly under attack. A few years ago in West Hartford, due to just mistakes, unforeseen mistakes, we had a snafu at the polling place and things slowed down. People had to wait in line maybe half an hour or an hour to vote. And there was outrage. There was state officials, the police, public works swarmed into polling places to get things fixed, to make it, to correct that problem. And I'm not even sure it was more than a few polling places, set up new lines and everything else, so people would be able to get in and vote as is their constitutional right. And here in West Hartford, we take that very seriously. We often usually win the award for highest voter turnout in the state for a town our size, and that we reacted to it. It was simply not acceptable in West Hartford. Unfortunately, we see that happening in other places, and the long lines are horrendous. And for whatever reason, it's the greatest form of voter suppression we have in this country. Anybody who's watching the news today, we saw what was going on in Georgia. Saw a quote from a woman who showed up first in line, and not accidentally an African-American woman, first in line in her precinct in Georgia, 4 hours later was still waiting to vote. And then other people who went cross town to wealthier, whiter districts and walked right in. It happens everywhere. It is outrageous. And it is something that we need to do everything we can to prevent. This particular resolution does not solve all of society's woes, but it does go in the right direction of ensuring that the voters of West Hartford and of Connecticut are able to exercise their constitutional rights in as simple and non-obstructed way as possible. In the short term, again, our registrars do a fantastic job. It is a vital job that they have to assure the constitutional rights of our citizens. And if they need the funding, we got to get them the funding. It can't not happen. And so with this, obviously with COVID, the need for people not to have to choose between their health and their vote seems pretty obvious to me. And I don't see much objection to that. Certainly people who are worried about COVID shouldn't have to walk into a polling place if they're not comfortable. And frankly, we want to keep those polling places as empty as possible. People who want to show up should show up, but obviously with the restrictions, it's going to be tougher. Having more people vote absentee ballot. Yes, there'll be some storage issues with the ballots and little problems, but ultimately that means people will be able to vote safely. And I think that's absolutely crucial. Long term, having more absentee ballot voting and freer absentee ballot voting will absolutely assure, the rest of the state the ability to vote safely. There are a lot of problems with the current Constitution and regulations regarding absentee ballot voting. For example, if you're a 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. nurse working at a hospital, it might be really hard to get to that polling place at 6 a.m. or get there after your shift. It is illegal right now for you to file an absentee ballot because you're in the city, you're in town between 6 and 6:30 before you leave for work, and you get home maybe by 7:30. That's no excuse under our current rules. That's unconscionable. We need to fix those rules. We need to allow more people to vote. Democracy is a good thing. We should trust it. We should trust in our citizens. We should trust in a good process that assures that, again, that constitutional right is protected. I will just say one other thing about West Hartford. Pridefully, we did win the cup most years for our high participation. What people don't know is that we actually have really high participation as well for absentee ballot voting. We have raw numbers of about the highest in the state. So a lot of people have in their mind sort of these different image of who does absentee ballot voting, and we hear about the scandals in some of our cities. It's our residents who know to do it. Hopefully more will do it for this election, and we'll see. We'll find out in August, and then in November. I think the process will work. So I strongly support the resolution. I thank those for bringing it forward, and for all the people who came and talked about it. And I do hope we'll pass it tonight and urge the legislature to get to work and pass their own bills as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Renegade. Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor, and through you to the rest of the council. I was listening to Ms. Blanks and Chief Riddick before. Ms. Blanks, you spoke about beginnings. Voting is just that. I believe in democracy. I believe in representative government. Our right to vote is a right, period. End of story. We need to promote voting rights and ensure all citizens can be and become part of this process of representative democracy. Our country is founded on many principles: freedom of speech, freedom of religion, trial by jury. Representative government is an essential keystone of our republic. While I do not believe that we as an elected local body have jurisdiction to decide and vote on this issue, I have heard from a resounding number of our constituents, both in writing, video, and some personally at a distance, socially and physically, who have expressed a desire to support this resolution. We heard a detailed presentation from our corporation counsel, and I'm sure from Dallas Dodge. I'm sure Gina Verano had a hand in it as well. I applaud their comprehensive, informative, eye-opening story to tell about absentee voting laws. Connecticut seems to be behind the curve. It's antiquated in its process, quite frankly. Because of those I represent on the council, because of those I represent by being on the council, both Republican, Democrats, as well as independent voters, along with my personal beliefs, I know it is my obligation and duty to vote in favor of this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Mr. Sweeney.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor. Thank you, Mr. Gold, for your comments, and thank you for everyone who participated in the special committee that we had, the conversation that we had a couple weeks ago. I thought what we saw there was that this is not a blue or a red idea. This is a bipartisan issue that has a multitude of different states that support it. And I think to Mr. Gold's point, you know, some of the things that we do in Connecticut are based on this like Yankee intuitive process that is it's outdated, right? And we're kind of stuck in our ways in a lot of senses. And I think this happens to fall into that category, unfortunately. You know, voting, as everyone has said, is such an important thing. I don't know why we make it so complicated for folks in this country, and then we step on the gas here in the state by making it also more. But I think that the main reason why I think it is important that the town talks about this is because, as was clearly demonstrated to us just a few minutes ago, was that the town is solely responsible for this action, right? For allowing and ensuring that this process works is solely run by members of our town staff, particularly the registrar of voters and the town clerk. And for us to remain silent on this and to not chime in and not hear all the facts on this, I applaud the mayor for putting this into the committee and having this kind of robust conversation where we did hear from members of the public. I think that was super important for the process, and super important for people at the government level to hear what the town actually does to ensure that people vote. But with that, I agree with Mr. Winter that this is one of the things that we've heard at almost every one of these rallies recently, talking about the need for change. The need for change only comes in one place, and regardless of what party it is, it comes at the voting booth. And I know that both Carol and Sherry has said that over the last couple of days, and it's the truth, right? This is the most important thing that we need to protect, and I think it is our job here at the municipal level to protect that with every cost. And I applaud Mr. Gold for joining us on this. As Mary Cantor said earlier, there are multiple blue and red states that are a part of this. And in fact, I'll leave you with this one fact, is that West Hartford is the second largest user of absentee ballots in the state of Connecticut, something that we don't think about. And I can only imagine that number is going to go up in these tough times. So again, thank you for everyone who participated. Thank you, Mary Cantor, for putting it to that. And I fully support this resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Mary, you keep going in and out. So if you want to talk, you need to tell me, because I don't know, you keep going in and out. Mr. Williams.
Madam Mayor. So just a couple things. The first one is on the jurisdictional issue. I've already articulated to this body that I'm concerned we're going outside the municipal realm when we're dealing with this issue and others. You know, we didn't take on the no tolls or the tolls on its face, but then we address guns, and now we're addressing absentee balloting. So I think there's a risk there that we're sort of expanding the scope of the issues we confront. Look, the first page of this resolution talks about the pandemic and how in this time of the pandemic, there's certain obstacles that voters face, and we want to accommodate those voters so that they can vote. And that's fine. I think everyone on this body agrees with that. And so, you know, the resolution tailored to that stated issue would make more sense than what we have before us. What we have before us is a resolution that uses the pandemic and the obstacles created by the pandemic as a means to expand absentee voting in perpetuity. And so so we're using the pandemic as the basis to expand a more broad policy consideration. And I don't know if it's the right way to go or not. The devil is in the details, as it so often is. We just heard from the Registrar of Voters. There's issues with the way the Secretary of State is sending out the applications. Obviously, I would think that whatever policy the state legislature came up with would not involve sending out applications of absentee ballots in every election, but who knows? Maybe that's the case. But look, we all know the stories of Florida, which has massive mail-in voting. More recently, it's always a mess down there. Last fall, we had Bridgeport, which was decided overnight through absentee balloting. There was a challenge to the election's legitimacy, and the court spoke on that. My point is just simply that this is not a solution as easy as this resolution suggests that it is, in my view. As Corporation Counsel brought up, this issue was pretty much before the voters in 2014, a little bit different, but expanded absentee ballot voting was up. It went down. 53% of the vote was against it, and that's the year Malloy won re-election. And I think that suggests that maybe this isn't what the public wants in perpetuity forever in Connecticut. But here we are. So those are just some of the concerns I have about this, and I will leave it at that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Williams. Again, I can't see Beth and I can't see Mary. I did text Beth and I don't think she wants to speak unless you want to open up your mic to speak. Mary, do you want to or no? I can't hear you. I can see you, but I can't hear you. Just shake your head if you don't. Shake your head if you do. I know. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I would.
Okay. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for
I'm not.
Hold on. I had my phone. Never mind. Doesn't matter. You can't hear me yet, right? Can you hear me?
Now I can. Go ahead.
Oh, geez. Thank you very much, Mayor Cantor. Yes, Mary Faith, Town Council, through Mayor Cantor. This is a very difficult issue because I absolutely believe in the right to vote. Take it very seriously. I registered to vote in high school, and I don't think I've missed ever an election. But I don't think we're there yet to implement this, just based on some technological issues and maybe perhaps the voter rolls. And I even think if there's just the possibility of a handful of votes being incorrect, then it makes the question of the whole election. I do concur with Mr. Williams on the jurisdictional issues, and I think if it was just a temporary step due to COVID, because I know people are concerned about that, absolutely. But I believe that they'll still go down and get their application, or somebody will pick it up for them and vote by absentee. So until the state really comes out very strong with this, I don't think that we should be proposing resolutions on state law. So the other thing was I was thinking about was consistency, and 169 towns. I would think we want something more uniform than that. So those are my comments, but I couldn't stress more how important it is for everybody to have the ability to vote, and nobody to be denied that. I certainly do believe that. So I have some trouble with the resolution, the way it's written, the way it's structured, but voting is a very serious, and that is where change happens. It happens in the voting booth. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fay. Ms. Blanks?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Cantor. So, as some of you have already spoke to this issue in terms of voting and how historic it is, and especially in my Black and Brown community, it's very sacred. And during this period, with the number of things that this community is experiencing, Black Lives Matter, this pandemic, how the pandemic has affected the Black and Brown community, how we're still losing lives every day. I remember when this pandemic started and the mayor talked about how many people she knew personally. And at that time, you know, I said, yeah, but now we're in this part of the pandemic. I have lost so many people to this pandemic, old, young, and middle age. And although this resolution is talking about a number of things, but more importantly, the safety, I think a few of you talked about how this absentee is done in other states, and it's almost like Connecticut is behind. And it's a New England state, right? I get it. However, I do strongly believe in this point in time of where we are, the safety of so many people are of the utmost concern. Listen, I worked in healthcare all of my adult life, and even some when I was a teenager. I understand, and this is an area where you just can't mess around. You can't say maybe or maybe not. And with this virus, we just don't know. You may appear healthy, you may be walking around with symptoms, and you don't know until well after, and now you've infected somebody, not intentionally. It is within our ability to keep folks safe, and we can do it. I think that's what we should do. And so with that said, I do support this resolution. I think it's beneficial for everybody. It keeps everybody safe. And I know many of you said with this pandemic, hey, it may be a temporary thing, it may not. But I have, through experience, know that this is one area that you do not want to mess around with, because we only have one chance at health, and we have got to, health is wealth. And if we're not healthy, then that affects every other area of our lives. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Blanks. Mr. Davidoff.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First, I'd like to thank you for bringing this resolution to the council table. I couldn't agree more with you, Madam Mayor, that this issue is one that needs to be discussed at this table, and which we need to transmit to our legislative delegation as to what we think is in the best interest of the citizens of the town of West Hartford. I believe the governor today has requested that the legislature go into special session to address absentee balloting, so it couldn't be any more timely. Every day since this COVID situation has taken place, I've spoken to people who are afraid to go out, to interact with people, and they're still afraid. 3 months, it's almost 3 months to the day where we started to stay apart. And people are like, I haven't stayed home for 3 months, okay? To be put into a position where I'm forced to go into a situation where I have to be in close proximity to other people. I speak to people who haven't been to a grocery store in 3 months, haven't done other things, haven't seen their family. But when you think about it, the right to vote, the right to select your representative government, it's paramount to our democracy. It's so important that I know that when I turned 18, I was dying to register, okay? It was the first thing I did. And I didn't have to have my parents say, well, you should register. And my kids, the same thing. They wanted to register to vote. It's just so fundamental to who we are as a people. And I don't know if I personally feel comfortable going in August to a polling place, but I know under the current absentee ballot statute, I cannot fit into any of those exemptions as to lawfully casting an absentee ballot as the constitutional statute, the Constitution and the state statutes are currently written. So why would I want to risk, okay, my personal health, my safety, for something that I think that we can change? And if nothing else has happened in the last few weeks, change is possible, and change begins with us. And it begins with elected officials here and now. And this is our first chance to say that change matters and that we're listening to the people of our town, of our state, and of our nation. And this is a very, very serious issue. It's one that, yes, there could be issues with voting, but there's issues with our current status of voting. But it's not something that we can't address and that we're not willing to address. But I think that we need our voices to be heard at the legislative level. Our citizens come out for a municipal election at high rates. We're going to be having a presidential election in November. I anticipate the turnout in West Hartford will be probably one of the highest in the nation. And it's no surprise that the people in West Hartford take their civic responsibilities very seriously. We're an engaged community who wants to do the right thing and wants their voice to be heard. And one of the most important voices to be heard is your vote. Your vote is your voice. And I'm not going to stand in the way of telling people that I don't respect that, because I believe that is so important. So I think our message, I hear the objections of some of my colleagues, but I think at this point in time, I just ask you to think for a moment and ask, wouldn't we be better off as a unified body asking our legislators to do what's in the best interest of the citizens of the town of West Hartford and the citizens of the state of Connecticut? That's how important voting is. And thank you for the opportunity to comment and to express my views. I totally appreciate that. And that's one of the freedoms we have of living in a representative democracy.
Thank you, Ms. Vayodoff. So I think I'll just close, and a lot's been said, but I think this is fundamentally a local issue. It's a public health issue that impacts we have experienced 3 months of how local public health, the impact of public health on our community is. And that includes anxiety, and that includes fear, as well as health. So I do believe it's very local. And as I said before, individual, and I said this at the advisory committee, but I just want to mention it because this was right before an election when we had that October snowstorm that impacted West Hartford uniquely. And without the ability to have no excuse absentee voting at that time, it was a scramble, and we didn't know what was going to happen with our polling locations and everything else. So I'd say the more tools that we can give our residents to vote, depending on what they're going through in their lives or what the town is going through, whether it's a bad flu season to a pandemic, to a storm, to some other crisis that happens, some other, God forbid, an accident that impacts people and the roads blocked and whatever, or lines that people can't take off enough time for work. I talked about my niece who was on a COVID floor, respiratory nurse who was working 7 to 7, and got to work early to get the transfer of her session, and she's in her clothes and would normally go home and shower, but if she's forced to vote, she's gonna go to a polling place. So I don't think this is something we take lightly. We've taken so many precautions to have our community put at risk because of voting if we're on an upswing and we don't know where we're going to be. So I think now time is of the essence. Let's prepare. Let's do this right. Let's give people the tools to use to vote. And that is, I think, a fundamental part of our job as elected officials. So with that, we will go to a roll call vote. Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks. Ms. Blanks.
Yes, in favor.
Ms. Cantor.
Yes, sorry.
Mr. Davidoff.
Yes.
Ms. Fay.
No.
I'm sorry, what was that?
No.
Okay.
Sorry.
Mr. Gold.
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan.
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney.
Yes.
Mr. Winograd,
Yes.
and Mr. Williams.
Abstain.
Okay, that's 7 in favor, 1 abstention, and 1 nay.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. I'm just going to go back to Ms. Kerrigan on the consent vote and just if you could verbally confirm that
Yes.
you. Thank you. All right, so now that vote is closed. So that was unanimous. Right, Ms. LeBreau, you got that? Yes.
Yes, it was 9-0.
Mayor Cantor, it was not unanimous, just so you know.
No. I'm talking about the consent vote that I asked Ms. Kerrigan on. I know this vote was not. This was 7-1-1. This current option, I went back to Ms. Kerrigan while I had her, and I asked for the consent vote. So the consent vote to adopt that calendar was unanimous. Is that clear, Ms. LeBreau?
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. So now new business, number 7, resolution approving programs eligible for the Neighborhood Assistance Act Tax Credit Program. I move that we adopt this resolution. And first would like this was the subject of a public hearing prior to this meeting. I would like the town manager to just do a quick little review of what this is.
Happy to do that, Mayor. Matt Hart, Town Manager. As we talked about during the public hearing, the Neighborhood Assistance Act program, it's a state tax credit program. It's something we do each and every year. It's designed to encourage and attract investment in our community nonprofits. So every year we issue a solicitation. This year we received 12 projects, or we're submitting a list of 12 projects from 10 local nonprofits. The projects total in value at approximately $907,000. Based on the feedback that we didn't receive any opposition at the public hearing, would respectfully request and recommend council approval.
Thank you, Mr. Hart. Are there any questions for Mr. Hart on this, or any comments about we can't do it. Well, it's a public hearing. So any comments on this particular item? I don't see any. Roll call, Ms. LeBreau?
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
That's unanimous, 9-0.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. I would like to move appointment of Mr. Rick Bush to the MDC for a term ending December 31st, 2023. And would any counselor like to speak to this appointment before we move? Mr. Gold.
Thank you, Mayor Cantor, and through you. I just very briefly wanted to express my support for Mr. Bush. I don't know of anybody to be able to fill the role as best as he can, as he has some large shoes to fill, filling in for his predecessor. He's been at the tip of the sword, so to speak, in dealing with the MDC, as his house was ground zero at one point. He's very knowledgeable of the MDC. I learned quite a deal during my campaign run, as many lunches with him. He briefed me, and I'm sure he briefed you, Mayor Cantor, many hours. And I think he is probably one of the most eligible candidates for that position. And we would be remiss not to put him in that role. And I know that he would be honest, be straightforward, and be true to form, and serve our town and MDC in that capacity as commissioner very well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gold. Any other comments? Okay, Ms. Winograd.
We never do this, but I want to echo Lee's comments. It's your appointment, but I think I really like the example actually Rick showed. He was great on the campaign trail, great humor, but I also just love the fact that how he got into politics, right? I mean, they had the problem with the MDC, came out of the neighborhood, and I do think he'll be a great asset to the MDC board. And I'm glad he's been nominated.
Thank you, Mr. Winograd. Ms. Blanks.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I think Rick Bush is awesome. And I too met him on the campaign trail. In fact, we took a picture together at one of the events. I think this man is very knowledgeable. He does his homework, he does his research, and I wholeheartedly support him for this particular appointment. You go, Rick.
Thank you. Any other comments? I will say the town manager and I met him at his, while he was cleaning out his basement with a lot of water-soaked, sewer-soaked items. So that was the first time I met Rick, and I have been inspired and impressed by him at every turn. So we're lucky to have your service, Rick, and if you're listening, but thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gold, for bringing him forward or talking him into it, twisting his arm. I don't know, but thank you. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of interaction with him, and we're lucky to have that. So with that, we will go to roll call. Ms. LeBron?
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Terrific. We have a new item. This item came up we weren't able to get this item on the agenda before the meeting was posted. So this is an appointment. So I thought we could do that. And everybody should have gotten a resume more than 24 hours ahead of time. So this is an appointment for Adrienne Billings-Smith as a member of the Human Rights Commission for a term ending. I need that from Ms. LeBreau. I don't have that term ending. Ms. LeBreau, do you have the term?
I'm going to have to check that. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So we will, I guess we're going to have to wait.
Sure, yeah, Dallas has his hand up.
Okay, Mr. Dodge.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a brief point of order, and maybe we could take care of this business while the town clerk looks up the end date for the term. But under the FOI Act, in order to add an item to the agenda after it's been posted, you're required to do so by a 2/3 vote. And so first we require a motion to add this item to the agenda. So if we want to act on that, and then you will have to separately act on the item once it's added to the agenda. And you're muted, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I was explaining that item, but we don't need the date for that. So adding Adrienne Billings-Smith to vote on her appointment, all those, we do have to do a roll call for that? Or
for that, because it's a procedural vote, Madam Mayor, you may do it without objection.
without, if there are any objections, so please let me know. If there are none, I will move on. I see no objection. So being no objection, the item is added. And then I move to appoint, I'll talk slowly.
Until December 31st, 2022.
Okay, I move to appoint Adrienne Billings-Smith to the Human Rights Commission for a term ending 12/31/2022. If there are any comments, Adrienne was somebody that reached out to me in sort of at the beginning of the past 2 weeks, and we've had several discussions. And she's an inspiration, and I think will be a wonderful addition to this commission. So, and it's her first time getting involved in the town. She's relatively new resident. So we're happy to have that. So with that, I'll roll Ms. LeBreau.
Ms. Blanks?
Yes.
Ms. Cantor? Ms. Cantor?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Davidoff?
Yes.
Ms. Fay?
Yes.
Mr. Gold?
Yes.
Ms. Kerrigan?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Winograd?
Yes.
And Mr. Williams?
Yes.
It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeBreau. Announcements I will go through very quickly. Pride flag raising will be Friday, June 12th at the Goodman Green. Everyone is welcome, but please wear a face covering. Blood drive, battle of the badges. Blood is very much needed during this pandemic. June 16th, 8 to 5:30. This is a Red Cross drive between our fire department and our police department, and they want to each earn bragging rights. So if you want to come and support, I guess you have to pick a team. West Hartford Farmers Market opens for the season. Actually, that's the Town Hall Auditorium. I don't know if I mentioned that. I just want to make sure that that's the case. It's usually where it is, and it's staying there. West Hartford Farmers Market opened on Saturday, June 6th. They will continue a weekly cycle every Tuesday, Saturday, 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the precautions are being followed. Census, please, a reminder that we currently have 73% of our residents that have returned their census. Our 2010 census return rate was 78.4. We want 100%. Please, please, please remind people that you know to return their census. This is actually puts us in line for all kinds of aid, and if we're undercounted, we are underserved. So please make sure we count. Food pantry is in need of donations. Over 200 bags of groceries are given away each week to families in need, and currently the town is only providing pre-packed bags to its clients to prevent the spread of the virus. So we're running low on a number of items. We will put this on the town website as well, but canned applesauce, cold cereal, tuna, rice mixes, baked beans, pasta sauce, pasta, spaghetti, peanut butter, jelly, soup, canned vegetables, macaroni and cheese, canned pasta, granola bars, baked mixes, toilet paper, toothpaste, and note for our corporation council, no jelly on that list. Sorry. Because he had a massive amount of jelly donation.
Mayor, there's no jelly on that list because a commitment of jelly has been made.
Exactly. Years worth of jelly. Go to the food pantry website for hours of operation and drop off times. And just remember this, especially as time goes on, the need is continuing and growing with each week. So we appreciate all of that. We are going to go into executive session. And there will be no action required by the council afterward. Accordingly, I move that we adjourn the public portion of the meeting, and in accordance with section 1206, right? 6, not G, 6 of the general statute, that we go into executive session to discuss the lease of property by the town. I would also like to invite Mr. Hart and attorneys Dodge and Verano to join us in executive session. Oh, sorry, Mr. Dodge. What did